Hey, testing audio.
Hey, it sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Hello, hello.
Started as a few other people join us. Hello, my name is Justin Asbury. I am one of the retail food specialists here with FDA. Please take some time to drop in your favorite puns in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from. I would like to welcome you all to the Southwest Breakout session. We have a packed, loaded type of agenda for you all here today. As a reminder, this session is going to be wide open to anyone from across the U.S. and abroad. So we welcome those who may not be tied to the Southwest area states. Some quick housekeeping. Please keep yourself on mute and your videos off to help save some of the bandwidth. During this session here today, we will hear from our Retail Food Protection Branch Director. We will celebrate some program standards, achievements. We will hear from CISFAN on some program standard updates and food additives. We will then wrap up things with a panel discussion on standardization and a Q&A session with some of our state program managers about their recent activities. So first off, we have Kimberly Destrump. Kim serves as our state cooperative programs Retail Branch 2 Director. Kim joins us from beautiful Wisconsin, and she's going to give us a further welcome, and just wanted to pass the ball to Kim. So without further ado, please take away, Kim.
There's the mute button. All right. Welcome, everyone. Let me just take a second to get this up and running here. And it's good to see you all virtually this year. I do want to say welcome to all of our colleagues from the former Southwest region and for many others that are joining. I do see that there are a lot of you may have been on the central breakout this morning. And so for those of you where I saw a few familiar names, I apologize. You might be hearing some similar information, maybe with a little twist. I guess this will be a test to see if I can deliver the same presentation twice in a row and make it sound the same. I tend to go off script a little bit, so I'm going to do my best for you. But you can call me out if you do catch anything that I changed up. As Justin mentioned, I am the Branch 2 Director for our Division of Retail Food Protection. And as such, I do cover many of the states in the former Southwest region. Not all of them, as our branches are different from the former regions. But I am very honored to have been asked once again to do the opening presentation for this session. So I'm going to talk a little bit, go through some news I want to share about some of the activities in a few of the states in the Old Southwest. And then I'm going to go into a little bit about new era for food safety. And if you're not familiar with the new era for food safety, I encourage you to check out our website. This is our most recent initiative, and it's going to be a very long-term initiative to bring us into the current age of food safety from where we're coming from. So without further ado, I do want to start off with a few moments of recognition and give a little Southwest love to you all and the hard work that you all have been working on. A lot of really great things have been happening in the Southwestern US, as you all know, because you are living there day in and day out. And so I just want to give a few highlights of things that have been happening. I want to mention in the state of Colorado, one of the things that they have done recently, which I think is really exciting, is develop a risk factor study in a box that they can give then to their locals and counties to assist in their design, sampling, collection of a data collection. As a former training officer with OTED, the concept of a course in a box is very near and dear to my heart. I think it's a really smart move and really exciting and innovative in order to assist. So congratulations, Colorado, on the work that you've done there and trying to maximize the data collections within the state. I also want to give a shout out to Mr. Dan Keller out in Nebraska, who has retired after more than 40 years at the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. And just had worked in a phenomenal program. So congratulations to you on a phenomenal career in public health and food safety. I also want to welcome Ms. Caitlin Andrews, who is taking his place as the new program manager for the dairies and foods at the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. Welcome, and we look forward to working with you in this capacity. So congrats to you both. I also want to give a shout out to Mr. Mark Jenkerson, who was recently promoted to the Food Operations Manager for over both manufactured and retail foods within the Bureau of Environmental Health Services in Missouri. So congratulations, that is a big job, and we're looking forward to working with you and all the work that you're going to do. And also Mr. Dusty Johnson, congratulations on your promotion to the Bureau Chief of Environmental Health Services. Great job, and we look forward to working with you all. I also want to give a quick shout out to our brand new Standardization Food Safety Inspection Officers. Bill and Uzo, congratulations. This is huge, and no easy feat by any means. Being standardized by FDA means that you have essentially passed a test of your ability to conduct quality inspections, risk-based inspections against the FDA food code to demonstrate your equivalency to our food safety, our retail food specialists, which is not easy to do at all. And this is by no means going to be an easy path either, because you will have maintenance requirements ongoing, and you're joining a phenomenal group of people who are standardized by FDA every 3 years. So congrats to you both. And also congratulations to all of our standardization officers who've been re-standardized in the last year as well. Now, please join me in sending congrats to all those that had great accomplishments here. And if I missed anybody, I truly do apologize. Becky is going to be talking a little bit more about our program standards achievements in a few minutes here. And so I'm going to defer to her for that. But I want you to know that I am so proud and so congratulatory to all the work that you've all been doing over the last year. And I look forward to what we're going to be doing next year. It's going to be great. And 2023 is going to be a very exciting year, I think. Some updates and just some information I want to share with you all. Our retail food flexible funding model application period is open, as you all probably know, but if you don't, please take a look at NEHA's website for information on how to apply. This is our new grant funding. It's the second year that we're going to be running this grant funding opportunity. You can apply through October 12th. It's a way to allow you funds to help promote your activity within the program standards. This year, we have funds available to complete a self-assessment and or a comprehensive strategic improvement plan. If you've already done those, you have more opportunities to get funds to help you on your way towards meeting program standards conformance. There's also training funds available. And just to put in a little plug, 2023 is a conference for food protection year. And so if that's something you're able to do, and I strongly encourage you all to attend CFP if possible, you can apply for funds to get the CFP this year. So consider that as an option if funding is an issue. Definitely look at those options there. And I believe there's also funds available for special projects this year as well. But if you do have questions, please reach out to your retail food specialist, or if you have questions about the application itself, you can always reach out to NEHA as well. All right, I also want to put a little plug in for our training needs assessment. And NEHA has this open right now, and you can see there's a little QR code on the screen. You can actually just take a little screenshot with your phone right now if you want. It's about a 20-minute assessment or survey. And this is actually being done for FDA. So it is going to be used by FDA itself to develop better training programs and classes. We're really looking for information on what training needs are out there and how we can better assess the needs of our community, which is you all. So I encourage you to take this. We would love to have every single person. It does not matter at what level you are, at what role you're in. If you are working in retail food safety, if you're working in, frankly, if you're working in any food safety, we would encourage you to take this assessment. Whether you are an inspector in the field or whether you are running an entire agency. We want everyone's opinion on here. So I encourage you to do that. I also want to mention, you're going to hear a little bit more about this later today, but our program standards has been released, the 2022 version. It is now available on the website, and there are changes that are posted in Standard 2, 6, and 8, which are reflect recommendations from the 2021 CFP meeting. So I would, especially if you are working on any of those standards, I would encourage you to access the updates, take a look at those, make sure you understand what they say. There's also a summary of changes. So I just wanted to mention that. Go to our website, you can get all that information downloaded now. I'm also pretty excited to announce some updates for 2023 and what's going to be happening in terms of our SAVA course workshop, our self-assessment and verification audit workshops. Once again, we're going to have 4 options for you to attend this workshop next year. 2 will be in person. They're going to be in conjunction with both AFDO's AEC and NEHA's AEC, and those are going to be in Norfolk and New Orleans respectively. They'll be next summer. Those do have a cost associated with them, but again, if you are eligible, you can apply for funds to get to those conferences. We are also having 2 instructor-led live virtual options in the winter this year in January, end of January and end of March. The good news here is that we have worked it out so that we can offer these 2 virtual workshops at no cost to attendees. So registration will be coming out soon. So if you have restrictions on travel or funds, these 2 workshops are targeted towards you. So please consider registering if you're interested once registration is open. I do want to mention that for our workshops, we do limit registration to only 2 attendees per jurisdiction. And the reason for that is really so that we can maximize attendance across the US. And it's not only limited to just 1 or 2 jurisdictions. We want to get the word out there. We do anticipate them filling up very quickly. So if this is something you're interested in, stay tuned. Information will be coming shortly. We also have our online self-paced modules that are housed within OTED's learning management system. We posted, I believe it's 3 modules this past year, and I think the rest of them are going to be posted in the coming year. So stay tuned for there, but you can also access those at any time, and they'll be available as long as you are a regulator. So we are very excited about this. And I have to say, I think what I am most excited about is 2023 is going to be the year where we can finally, maybe, I think, get together in person. I hope you all come and visit me in Houston next year in April at CFP. You can come visit me, you can come visit your specialists. We're going to be there at CFP and addressing the retail food safety issues of the day. I'm very excited about that. And also, even if you're not able to attend, your specialist is going to be preparing coordination calls to have you understand the issues at play so that you can voice your opinions to those that need to hear it. I do think that CFP is probably one of the most important meetings when it comes to retail food safety you can attend. I encourage everyone to try to get there if possible. I like to use the analogy, if you're a Hamilton fan, if you want to be in the room where it happened, that would be CFP. So come join us in the room where it's going to happen in 2023 if you're able. I also want to mention that I think after 3 years of being virtual for these seminars, we are ready to move back to face-to-face. This is very exciting. We're looking forward to having a year next year that looks a little bit similar to where we came from prior to the pandemic. We're planning to do face-to-face seminars in 2023. I do want to say, though, that they may not look exactly the same way that you may have been used to. A lot of things have happened in the last 5 years, pandemic aside. FDA has actually moved away from a regional structure. So the regions, as you formerly knew them, do not exist. And while we have been kind of trying to maintain that structure a little bit over the last number of years, beginning in 2023, the seminars will not be regionally affiliated. That does not mean that you cannot attend the same seminar in the locations that you're used to or work with the same states that you're used to. It just means that our seminars are really going to be open to anyone. We understand that we have to have some flexibility based on new policies within states and jurisdictions about travel, and costs have really gone up. And so we want to make sure that anyone is able to get to a seminar that meets their needs. So stay tuned on that. We're really excited about the coming changes and updates. We do not have locations set yet, but once we do, we will let you all know where the seminars will be for next year. All right. So now in the few minutes I have left, I just want to go through a few updates on our new era of smarter food safety. This is Frank Yanis's brainchild that we've been following for the past few years, and I wanted to provide a little update as to where we're at and where we are going. So some of you may be aware, New Era has 4 core elements. We have tech-enabled traceability, smarter tools and approaches for outbreak response, food safety culture, and of course, our core element 3, which is new business models and retail modernization. Now, all 4 of these have an impact on the retail world, but where we really are focusing in is this core element 3. And in fact, our retail team is leading core element 3 in Frank's team. So the 2 bullets you see here, the first one is food producer delivered using new business models is our e-commerce platform. And this is the big one, right? We have a lot of questions on this. There's a lot of confusion, both with us and I think with our states and locals on how do we evaluate some of these new business models. And the second bullet here is really modernizing the traditional retail food safety approaches. You know, one thing we know is that the lines have become completely blurred. It is not clear anymore what is retail versus what is strictly manufacturing. They're crossing lines all over the place, and businesses are doing everything and all over the place. So we really have to have an understanding of how do we approach that from a food safety standpoint, and what is the best way that we can make the meaningful change that we're looking for. So when it comes to the e-commerce, the new business models, we had a summit in 2021 that was very well attended nationally, internationally, and we got a lot of feedback. The biggest question that was asked is who owns the last mile and who is responsible for ensuring the safety of some of these products that are being put out there. We have not just we have meal delivery kits, but we have new distribution models. We have robots delivering food. We have robots making food. We have unattended retail operations. We have retail operations that are manufacturing in what looks like a traditional manufacturing setting, but they're doing 100% retail. So we have a lot of things that are new that we haven't had to deal with prior. And so we're going to be deep diving into the regulatory landscape over the next year to really clarify where our regulations stop and where they have to pick up. And if there's any gaps in the middle, how we can best address those together. Now, when it comes to the vision of modernization, there is so much here that we want to do. The biggest thing we're looking at for the next year is identifying an independent contractor to do a full national assessment of the retail regulatory system. This means someone from outside of the retail or even food safety world to look at how our system works, what is successful and what do we want to amplify, or what has not working and what we need to stop doing and what else we can do to try to make the difference that we're looking at. You know, these bullets here on the screen are the things that we're really trying to take a look at and to see how we can maximize their use. You know, I use the idea that I guess it's not so much of an analogy, but when we talk about how to make change, what we've been doing, is it really working? So we've been doing the same things over and over and over again, but yet people are still not washing their hands. And we saw a global pandemic where there was an international push for hand washing has now completely tapered off and we're back to normal. So what does it take? And I think it really takes food safety culture and it takes behavior change. And so we have to start looking at things that we traditionally have not had to look at. Food scientists are not behavioral scientists, but maybe we need to bring them in to understand how to have a greater impact. So the road ahead for New Era is we are also going to be working better and more collaboratively with our partners. We established the Association Collaborative a few years back, and now we are working very strong and very collaboratively to move forward on some of these national initiatives that take more than just us. We can't do any of this alone. We need our association partners, we need our regulatory partners, we need our industry partners to really make an impact on the areas that we want to see change. Together, we can do more than if we just work independently. We're all working towards the same goal, all taking a piece of that pie. It'll come together a lot faster. That is what they call synergy. That old word, it used to be a buzzword many, many years ago. I think we need to bring it back because we need to work in that direction and really making an impact. So I'm very excited about the coming year. I hope you are too. And I thank you for allowing me to present a little bit on what we're up to and where we're going. I know I went a couple minutes over and I apologize, but hopefully if there are any questions, I can answer them in the chat so I don't take up too much of the time. But I will turn it back over to Becky. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Kim. And we're going to jump right into program standards accomplishments. And let me go ahead and bring up share my screen. Maybe. There we go. Actually, no, stop. I need to give an intro first, I guess, before it starts playing. So for the program standards accomplishments, everyone on our Office of State Cooperative Programs team, we're really excited to recognize our state, local, tribal, and territorial jurisdictions that have made commitments to the continuous improvement of the retail food regulatory programs, as demonstrated by updating their retail program standard self-assessments and successfully passing verification audits over the last year. These remarkable achievements by each agency are reflected currently on FDA's website, and that gets updated when you turn in your Form 3958 to your retail food specialist. Active participation in the retail program standards clearly demonstrates a remarkable level of commitment to achieving program excellence. So we applaud each program's leadership and are committed to supporting ongoing efforts to enhance the public health services provided by each jurisdictions. I would like to emphasize that 74% of the jurisdictions that you'll see represented here are recipients of Retail Flexible Funding Model grant awards for fiscal year 22. So I think it's important to highlight that, because the work that these jurisdictions are all doing, or the majority of these jurisdictions are doing, is supported by grant dollars to aid them in meeting particular program goals and objectives. And as Kim had already mentioned, hopefully you're aware, the application portal for the RFFM fiscal year 23 applications is open through October 12th. I'd be remiss if I didn't also say that we would like to recognize the work that every program is doing in the retail program standards. This includes work that may not be reflected in this presentation that you're going to see, because maybe you're not due for a self-assessment, or you're in the middle of working on your self-assessment, or you've made significant progress towards conformance with the standard or multiple standards, and you just have not assessed it yet. So just to be clear, we at FDA, we recognize that our SLTT jurisdictions are working hard on the standards. Us retail food specialists, we receive many questions for technical assistance related to the program standards. So we know you're incorporating them into your retail food protection programs. And we're excited to see continued progress and celebrate achievements as they're made. So without further ado, let's take a look at the accomplishments from September 1st, 2021 through September 1st, 2022. And again, congratulations to all. All right, so congratulations again to all. And again, that is like I don't know how many minutes that presentation went, 5 or 6, but that represents a tremendous amount of work on behalf of all of the jurisdictions that were represented there. See some kudos coming into the chat. Thank you all for the hard work that you're doing. And I'm going to turn it over now to Celeste. We're going to move into our next presentation. And up to you, Celeste.
Oh, thank you, Becky. It is my pleasure. I am Celeste Parker. I'm a retail food specialist with Office of State Cooperative Programs here in Dallas, Texas. And it is my pleasure to introduce Robert Sedler, Consumer Safety Officer with the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, Retail Food Protection Policy Team. Mr. Sedler joined CFSAN's policy team in January of 2015. At CFSAN, he works on updates of the FDA Model Food Code, the supplements to the food code, as well as the voluntary retail program standards. Prior to 2015, he served as the program manager for the District of Columbia's Department of Health, Food Safety and Hygiene Inspection Services from 2007 to 2014. In his role as program manager, he helped to coordinate and manage food safety and security for 4 presidential inaugurations, as well as many other national special security events in the DC area, including the Nuclear Security Summit, the African Leaders Summit, the IMF World Leaders Summit, and the G8 and G20 summits. From 1999 to 2007, he was responsible for standardization and training of sanitarians in his role as a food technologist for the District of Columbia Health Department. He has additional work experience related to the USDA's Agriculture Research Service, the University of Maryland and FDA Joint Institute Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, the Philadelphia Zoological Society, and the Roan Polnick Rohrer Pharmaceuticals. He obtained his master's in food science from the University of Maryland, College Park in 1999. While attending UMCP, he co-authored research involving antibiotic resistance of gram-negative stain pathogens isolated from retail meats. He also holds a Bachelor of Animal Science, which was obtained in 1998 from the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. He is originally a proud person from the Philadelphia, city of Philadelphia, and now resides in New Jersey. So welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Celeste. Appreciate it. Clear my throat here. So I'm very happy to join you all today. My office is based in College Park, Maryland, and luckily, since we've been teleworking, I have not had to make that 3.5-hour commute from South New Jersey. So I'm very happy to join you here today and share some information with you all about the recently released 2022 version of the retail program standards. As Kim touched on during her presentation, there really were changes to mainly 3 standards, 2, 6, and 8. So what I want to do is I want to spend some time walking you through those changes and also spend a little time to navigate our website so you'll know exactly where to find all the information that you need to assist you. And we'll definitely leave some time for questions. So let's get started here. Again, as Kim mentioned, a lot of these changes that we make to the program standards are actually a result of the CFP conference that takes place usually in the previous year. We get started working on the standards literally from the time we leave CFP, we start diving in and making changes, and that's a long process. So recently, August 24th of this year, we did post a new version of the 2022 standards. And again, the information is mainly a reflection of the recommendations submitted by the conference. So let's go through those changes. And again, we'll make sure that we leave some time for questions afterwards. So let's start off with standard 2. And really, as I explain these, I want you to think about the 2019 version versus what is up there now, which is the 2022 version. So when you look at the 19 version, you may have realized that the B1, Appendix B1 within Standard 2, it was somewhat cumbersome to follow. All the classes were there, but it really was a list of just all these different classes. And one of the recommendations that we got from the conference was to reformat that B1 table. So to have it basically set up in columns where you'll have the topic areas on one side and then the classes available within those topic areas on the other side. So if you take a look at the new B1, you'll realize that that format has changed. We hope that it makes it a little easier for people to follow. One thing I will say about B1 is that I would recommend that you constantly or frequently check our website, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, to make sure that you capture the updates. Because obviously, once we go to print with the B1 that we have at the time, that won't change over 2 years. But the B1 electronic version that's on the web, we do plan to add classes to that table over time. And the best way to capture those changes is to make sure that you frequently review that B1 that's online. Okay? So with regard to the curriculum that changed in Standard 2, there was technically only one class added this time around, and that's the B2 allergens class, which replaces FD 252. So that is one class that you will see that is different from the 2019 version. And again, please make a note to constantly check that B1 because we will have classes added over time. Another change that occurred within Standard 2 is previously you were given 18 months to complete steps 1 through 4. And there was a lot, we were in the middle of a pandemic. We know that there was a lot of staff turnover. So we think that there was a reasonable request to add 6 months to that time frame. So what you will see now is that you now have 24 months to complete steps 1 through 4. And those steps include, completion of your pre-curriculum courses, the 25 joint inspections and completion of the CFP field training manual, 25 independent inspections and post-curriculum courses, and also that field standardization similar to FDA. So our intent and our hope is that that extra 6 months will give people a little bit more flexibility, given what we've all been through in the past few years here. We thought that that was a reasonable change to make, and you will see that reflected in the 2022 version of the standards. Okay, so with Standard 2, it was pretty simple, pretty straightforward in terms of what the changes were. Standard 6 and Standard 8 are a little bit more involved, but again, we're going to walk through those and we're going to make sure that you have a good understanding of what's going on there. Okay, so Standard 6 really speaks to your compliance and enforcement program and how you have that set up, with the goal being that if you cite a violation, a risk factor violation during an inspection, do you have a policy that deals with how that violation will be corrected? Will it be corrected on site? Will you be given 5 days or whatever your policy may be to fix that violation? If they don't fix it, is there a follow-up? Is there any kind of enforcement activity? So whatever you have within your policy, Standard 6 looks to evaluate if that's actually working. So let's talk about what the change was. So initially, if you use the 2019 version of the standards, Standard 6 asked you to look at your inventory, and there's very prescriptive numbers in terms of how much of your inventory you have to look at based on your numbers and within your jurisdiction. But it was really straightforward, and it was really only one way to conduct that file selection so you could eventually evaluate those files to determine where you are with Standard 6. The major change that has been made to that standard now allows you different options in order to conduct your file sampling. Or your file selection. So for example, one of the new options would be if you have a jurisdiction that is small enough in terms of your facilities and you just want to use all of your inventory to evaluate Standard 6, you now have that option. okay? And you also have an option to basically take your inventory and maybe select a subset of what you have. So for example, if you are really concerned that if you look at a lot of your risk level 1 inspections, you may not have a lot of risk factor violations identified on those. And therefore you could be spending time picking files that won't necessarily help you evaluate standard 6. You now could do a subset. So for example, maybe you want to just pick your risk level 2s and risk level 3 inspections, and that will be your starting point for how you evaluate your facilities. Now, some things haven't changed. We're still asking you to pick those 3 inspections and go back and look at how violations were corrected over time from that first start point inspection moving forward. But again, this does allow you some flexibility in terms of not just having to take your whole inventory and take, based on what was in standard 6 already and, whittle it down from there. You can now start off with, for better choice of words, a subset of your inventory that will allow you to still move forward and address standard 6. We have not really changed any of the audit procedures. This strictly deals with the file selection initially when you first start off looking at standard 6. So we hope that, people are comfortable with this. This was also based on an issue that was submitted through CFP. We know over time, as you interact with your retail specialists, you may feel the need to bounce certain things off of them in terms of how you want to approach standard 6. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Your retail specialist can be a great resource. They've kind of seen other things. They can use that experience to help you with your situation. So please reach out to them if you are considering using either 2 of the new options that have been introduced for standard 6. And again, this just applies to the 2022 version. The good news with the new change is that if you still wanted to approach standard 6 the way that it was in previous editions of the program standards, you still have that option. So we have maintained the option that was in previous versions, in addition to listing 2 additional options that will help people when they're determining how they want to do their file selection. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, hold your questions and we will get to that in a little bit here. So that is what really changed in standard 6. I would say that if you aren't familiar with the standards in terms of what the re-revisions were, this standard had the most revision. So if you really want to focus on that, please look at the documents that are online now, and it will kind of walk you through the process, and you'll see those additional options captured in standard 6 now. So let's move on to standard 8. Standard 8 has always been a challenging standard for a lot of people. I know that in my experience in dealing with this standard, it was very difficult for us to meet the staffing level element. The staffing level element is the only element that changed within standard 8. So let's take a step back. Let's look at what 2019 version said. What the 2019 version said is that if you have between 280 and 320 inspections per staff member, per inspector, so if your inspectors were doing between 280 and 320 inspections per year, that would mean that they would be eligible to meet that standard based on what everybody else was doing. So all your staff employees would have to fall into that range. We know that that is a very difficult accomplishment. Usually, I remember when I conducted this work on Standard 8, we had employees that were well in excess of 600 to 700 inspections per year. So we knew that we would never be able to meet that staffing level element of Standard 8. However, there was some good news that came out of that, because as we were able to demonstrate that we were doing too many inspections per inspector, I was able to go back to our leaders, our city council in my case, and I was able to lobby for additional staff by showing them that the calculations that we had done within Standard 8 were not adequate. We did not have enough people. So that was a mechanism for us to obtain more staff. And some of you may have been using the former Standard 8 model for staffing level element to do just that. Go to your leaders, try to get more people. But as we move forward, and again, this was based on an issue that was submitted to the Conference of Food Protection, one of the new changes in determining your staffing level, actually there's two more options, just similar to Standard 6. There are now two additional options that you can use. Basically, we've kept the 280 to 320 because we realize that there is some value in jurisdictions being able to lobby for more staff. So we felt that there was a need to keep that. But now there is also some information posted on the CFP website that was submitted as part of the issue from the submitter at this past conference that gives you a new way to look at calculating your staffing levels. It takes into consideration your travel time. The main thing it takes into consideration is the amount of time it's spent on particular risk level inspections. So for example, we all know that a risk level 4 is going to take more time than a risk level 1. This new model and this new information that's on CFP's website accounts for that particular change. There's a document that walks you through how the issue submitter came up with their formula. There's an Excel spreadsheet that you can populate with your information to assist you with that. But basically, it's a new way to determine that staffing level. So that's one of the new options, and it's associated with the documents that are on the CFP website. The other option, which is very open-ended, allows you as a jurisdiction to determine whether you are adequately staffed or not. For example, let's go back to the 280 to 320. Maybe your number for your inspectors is 500, but within that 500, you're getting everything done. You've mapped out all your inspections for the year. You're getting them all done. You're able to address your complaints. You're able to address your training. So even though your number is higher than what we have prescribed in the standard before, who's to say that you aren't adequately staffed? And if you can demonstrate that and to an auditor when you have Standard 8 audited, that would now also qualify as a way to meet that staffing level element. So in long and short, you now have three options in order to meet the staffing level element. And again, this is just focused on staffing level. It has nothing to do with the other things that are called for in Standard 8 with regard to resources, administrative equipment. We did not touch that information. This strictly deals with the staffing level. So again, you have three options now. The first option would be to do exactly what was in the standard before. Use the 280 to 320 number. If you fall within that range, great. If you don't, you have justification to get more staff. The other option would be to use some of the information that's on the CFP website that is associated with the issue and the issue submitter. And that information can be very helpful for you in looking at a new way to determine staffing level. And then the final option really is incumbent upon you and what your jurisdiction does. Maybe there's another way that you can demonstrate that you've actually met the staffing level, and you can share that with an auditor. You want to lay it out. You want to show them, look, this is what we've done. We feel like we're getting all our work done. And even though our ratio might be a little higher than what FDA has in the standards, it doesn't mean that we're not working as an efficient unit and getting all our work done. Maybe your people are just more productive. A lot of factors we have to consider. Depending on the part of the country you live in, we have to account for weather. So are there certain days you can't go out and get these inspections done? All those things need to be considered when you're trying to determine whether you have enough staff to conduct your work. So I would say, and I'll back up for a minute, with regard to Standard 6, if you are going to approach some of those new options, you first do want to reach out to your retail food specialist, but I would highly advise you to also get a statistician involved in whatever new way that you want to approach Standard 6. Standard 8, you may also need to have a statistician involved if you have, a unique way of trying to figure out if you meet staffing level, but not so much with Standard 8 as Standard 6. So again, I know that was a lot of information. I really do think there would be some value in sharing with you how to find all these documents, how to find all this information on the website. So in terms of the changes, that is really what has changed from 2019 to 2022. Again, I would take some time to look at the Conference for Food Protection's website so you can kind of familiarize yourself with the issues that actually led to these changes, and also look at the FDA response letter, which will tell you not only what FDA agreed with regard to the program standards, but also the food code. So that letter is very important for, it's the only communication that we have with CFP in between, when we leave the conference and we actually make the changes. Now, of course, there's meetings and board meetings and things like that, but in terms of written communication back and forth between CFP and FDA, that response letter is a great place to start. If you want to kind of get a sneak peek at what's going to be changing, I would always refer to you to look at that letter that is posted shortly after the conference. So let me stop here, and I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to jump to our website. And there have been some changes to our website also. So you really want to make sure that you frequently check our website to make sure that you are up to date with those changes. So hopefully everybody can see my screen here. This is our main landing page for the Retail Food Program Standards. And as you'll see here, those of you that were familiar with this page, we had the general information, but after this point, it got a little clunky in terms of where do I find information? How do I locate it? What we've tried to do is make this page a little bit more user-friendly. I'm going to scroll down, but I am going to come back to this tab here in a minute. So now what you'll see is there's several references to your retail food specialist. And what we've done is we've tried to put that in one place. When you click on this tab, it will jump you to a link that will have all your retail food specialists, their contact information, the jurisdictions and the states that they're responsible for covering. So you always have to have this front of mind because you're always generally going to have to reach out to your specialist for a number of things, not just program standards, but food code, technical questions. We wanted to make sure that that link is very highlighted for you to find. Okay, so now we want to talk about a little bit about who's enrolled. This should be familiar for people. This will lead you to the Excel spreadsheet that's on our website, and it will have all the information that you have submitted as a jurisdiction on your 3958 to your retail food specialist. They'll be able to, process that information, and eventually there is a lag. So I don't want people to think if you submit a 3958 tomorrow that you're going to see your information up there by Thursday, because it does not work that quick. There's generally a 3 to 4 month delay in posting your information. So don't panic if you don't see it. It doesn't mean that we haven't got it. It just means that we have not uploaded a recent batch of information to reflect on the website. So again, that has not changed. What has changed is some of these links down here. Before, this information was spread all throughout the sheet and it really wasn't any organization to it. So for example, now, Kim talked about the upcoming SAVA workshops, and you'll see the announcement for this seminar that we're participating in right now. You'll see the announcement that Kim talked about that, these audit workshops are coming up. Now the registration hasn't opened, but we do want to let you know that it's upcoming, and we want to put that information as soon as we get it under this course and workshops events tab. We still have the information for funding and grants. This will give you links to the flexible funding model, also to AFTO, NACHO information, and also FDA's Office of Partnerships. So those links will take you to their sites, give you more information about funding. Let's go back up a little bit. If you are working on more than one type of standard, this will give you the links to the other standards: animal feed, manufactured, egg regulatory, and also finally supporting materials, which we will constantly update. We have the crosswalk here, FAB accreditation, impact of a lot of NACHO information on here about mentorship. So again, we wanted to try to just make this page a bit more user-friendly, make it a bit more direct. So in case you're looking for something specific, you can find it. But I guess everybody is saying, okay, that's all great, but where do I actually find the worksheets and information that I need to complete the standards? That's where you're going to hit this tab right here. This is going to jump. Don't worry about this November date. We're going to resolve that. The standards were released in August. So don't think about November in terms of it being released, because they're out now. But this is the page that most people are probably familiar with, which actually has all the broken up information. And I'm going to show you all this information from standard 1 all the way through standard 9. has been updated to reflect the 2022 version. I'm going to go back up because we also have a lot of information here that is very helpful for people. So for those of you that are familiar with the Clearinghouse releases a document prior to CFP that has a number of questions that were submitted by jurisdictions and filtered through their retail food specialists. If your retail food specialist cannot answer the question, what they will do is forward it to the Clearinghouse work group for an interpretation. The Clearinghouse work group is made up of 6 members from state, local, and territorial tribal jurisdictions. It also has a standing spot for the program standards CFP chair, and that's Angie Wheeler at this time. And it's just a great resource if you're conducting an audit to get some questions that may have been asked prior to you asking them, and the Clearinghouse work group has already worked to answer those questions for you. So that link here will take you to that document. We have a fact sheet that also kind of explains how the Clearinghouse works. We don't actually change any standards language. We simply evaluate what language is there already. You'll see the administrative procedures. This is very important. This gives you all the timelines for submissions, when a self-assessment needs to be done, when does it expire, when an audit needs to be done. All that information is contained here in the procedures. I do want to highlight a new document that we have just added to this website. It's a retail program standards timeline. And it's basically, the way you should think about it is a visual version of what's in the administrative procedures. We found that it's been very helpful in some of the workshops, and we think that it will help you. And if you need to associate what's going on in the administrative procedures with that timeline, it will be very helpful to you. Finally, last 2 items here, you have 3958, which is your way of telling FDA what you have done and how you've done it and when you've done it. You obviously work with your retail specialist to get that 3958 submitted to FDA. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we will also update our website as we get these forms from our specialists and they provide the information and update the information into their database. We will transfer that over and it'll be reflected online. So that's the way that you get information to us. If you are dealing with any of the other worksheets and things within the standards, they are technically optional. You do not have to use them, but we have spent a lot of time trying to make them work for you. But again, 3958 is the form that you have to submit if you want the information shared with FDA. And then finally, hopefully most of you are familiar with the gap analysis tool. This is also something that's not necessarily mandatory, but it's a good way for you to kind of track your progress within the standard that you're working on. It has benchmarks already laid out. So you're able to say, hey, we've met 50% of this standard. We know what more we need to do. This is also a great tool if you want to share with your upper management who aren't necessarily familiar with the program standards lingo and they don't really understand what it means to meet a standard. Give them a visual representation to say, hey, look, we've met 50% of this standard. This is what we've done. This is what we need to do. This tool will really help you gather and summarize that information. So all of these documents here are meant to help you. You have information about program standards definitions. All this information is here to assist you. These forms here from Standard 1, the audit form, the instructions form, these are all fillable forms. And we spent a lot of time working through 508 issues and making sure that these are fillable for anybody who wants to use them. So if you are working on one particular standard and you want fillable versions of those worksheets, you're going to go here and download them first to your computer, then fill them out and save them. So a lot of times people will download it and they fill it out and they don't save it to their computer prior to filling it out. And then they look up and none of the information is there. So if you really want to use these worksheets, make sure you download them, save them to your computer, then fill them out as you work on the standards and save that final version. And again, these aren't necessary for you to turn into your specialist, but they are there to help you, assist you, and get you through a particular standard. Final thing I want to show you, the final 2 things I want to show you on this website. This is a new change too. So you have the summary of changes document. which basically would really lay out everything that I talked about in the previous presentation, the changes to 2, 6, and 8. There's not much detail there, but it's enough detail for you to know exactly what changed and to give you an indication as to whether you need to look at that or not. But one thing that we have added, which is new, is that there was some jurisdictions that had requested that we do a whole version of the standard. So the whole book itself is captured here in the compiled version of the standard. So if you're interested in downloading a whole manual, and I know that's a lot of trees that you'd have to sacrifice there, but if you are interested in having that or having it on your desktop, this would be something that you would want to download. It would contain all the information that is up here. The one thing about this document is it's not fillable. So if you just want the document to have, to reference, to look at, that's fine. But in terms of it being fillable, you will still have to access these documents that are here within each standard. So I know that was a lot of information. I have not been able to look at the chat, but I will stop here to see if there are any questions about 2, 6, 8, or the website itself.
And Robert, at this
Yes.
moment, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. And thank you, Becky, for dropping the link to this main page for the program standards into the chat if you want to copy that URL.
Yeah, so again, look, folks, I know that there's always a push to let's meet a standard. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. But I really would hope that you all look at the standards as a continuous improvement model. We want you to get better over time. There are going to be things that happen. For example, none of us could have anticipated the time that we would have to spend with COVID. Maybe that puts you behind a bit with regard to the standards, but it doesn't mean that it's over. It doesn't mean that you can't restart. Reach out to your retail food specialist. They will give you the exact guidance you need to get you either restarted or continue the momentum that you had before. But again, we want you to look at this as a marathon and not a sprint. If you meet every standard, that's going to be a great accomplishment, but we really want to make sure that you can continue to stay at that level and continuous improvement. Evaluate your program on a constant basis to see if there's things that need to change. So I see there's a question here, Jeff Hall, is there a way to benchmark your organization against others? Is this something that can't be used to compare to jurisdictions? Jeff, that's a good question. One thing that I didn't mention on this presentation was the Program Standards Resource Center site associated with Food Shield. And I would reach out to Alicia Johnson or John Tran if you have any interest in that. But to address your question, Jeff, that will it's meant to be a sharing site for other jurisdictions that are working on the standards. They can share documents. Hey, this is what we've done. This is what worked for us. This is what didn't work for us. So I think that that's kind of the forum that you're talking about but to really evaluate yourself against another program, really the only way you can do that is to look at our Excel spreadsheet, and you'll be able to see what everybody's done, whether they've met 9 standards, 1 standard, still working to meet that standard. But again, I would encourage you to really either, if you're not a member of that site, I would encourage you to join it, because that's a way that you can work with your other jurisdictions, share information, not recreate the wheel, not spend a lot of time doing something that you're going to realize later on that you wasted time doing. Take advice from other jurisdictions that have traveled down that road and that have done some of the things that you're trying to do. I would look at it in that sense and compare that way. You always can reach out to another jurisdiction, whether it be for an audit or just assistance. The retail program standards networks that have been talked about during this seminar are also a great resource. So we want you to work together. We know that these aren't easy. We know that there's a lot of time that has to be spent. We know that people have other duties in addition to what is required within the standards. But I would certainly encourage you to reach out to John or Alicia to get more information about the Program Standards Resource Center. Yes, Jeff, let me have Alicia and John. You can, well, one thing you can do, John, is Jeff, you can access the directory of specialists on this page that I just showed you. And that will have Alicia and John's information, but they're also putting it in the chat. So they saved you some time there. Okay. Great. So again, the only other thing that I will say is that Kim mentioned the upcoming CFP meeting. We're about to go through this process again. So you will see some issues that are coming out of committee related to the program standards that recommend additional changes to the standards that will be reflected in the next version that we release, which will be 2024. So please take note of those issues that are coming in. If you have a chance to attend the conference, try to get a better sense of how those issues are being debated. And also look at the FDA response letter back to CFP once the issues are shared with FDA and FDA has a chance to respond. So you'll be able to stay in the loop of what's going on. You can kind of anticipate what some of the changes will be moving forward. But that next chance comes up very soon here. So we look forward to maintaining this document. The retail specialists are committed to supporting you as much as they can. You know, I know a lot of them do more work. You know, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I know they work sometimes in excess of what they're supposed to. So please use them as a resource. We all are committed to helping you through the standards and making sure that you can set up your program to be as successful as it can be. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Robert. You provided some wonderful information for us. Thank you. And I'm going to turn this over to Justin. I believe we're due for a short break.
Yes, well, thank you, Celeste, and thank you, Robert, for that presentation. So we're going to do a shorter break than what's on the agenda so we can stay on topic and on time. So we'll come back at 12 after the hour, okay? All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I apologize for that short break. I just wanted to make sure that we all had enough time to do our bio break and maybe grab a coffee refresh before we continue. So next we will have our standardization panel, who will be moderated by Becky Steiner, one of our retail food specialists. So I will pass it on to Becky. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. And really quickly, while our first panelist is bringing up his presentation, I'm going to just give a high-level overview of standardization and also introduce our three panelists for this panel discussion. I recognize that, especially over the last several years, or couple years really, we've the landscape of who we have working in the role of food safety has shifted. And also, we've got about, last I looked, about 55% of the attendees for the seminar are local regulators this year, which is great. So I just wanted to kind of briefly explain what standardization is for those who are less familiar. So I'm dropping a link here in chat for the FDA standardization link on our website. But the purpose of FDA standardization is to promote uniformity of regulatory retail food inspections, and it's used to reduce the risk of foodborne illness based on a science-based interpretation of the food code and the effective principles to achieve compliance. Standardization evaluates the candidate's understanding and application of the food code provisions as well as inspection technique. The process ensures that the candidate is able to recognize foodborne illness risk factors, food code interventions, and good retail practices, and it confirms that the candidate can achieve a practical and immediate correction of out-of-compliance risk factors, as well as that they can communicate with establishment personnel to understand and assess processes and principles. As a result, the standardization process can strengthen active managerial control at retail to ensure better compliance from industry. It encourages widespread uniform application and interpretation of the FDA food code and creates an enhanced local regulatory environment for retail food operators. The FDA Standardization Procedures Manual, which you can find with that link in the chat, is intended to serve as a template for state and local regulatory jurisdictions to develop their own written protocol to ensure personnel are trained to competently conduct inspections. The standardization procedure is applicable to regulatory retail food programs as part of the retail program standards. So we have three panelists that are going to share today what's happening in their jurisdiction. So the first one that's going to be presenting is Matt Brandt. Matt has been in the environmental health field for over 14 years, 9 years of which he's been at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. He's worn many hats in his environmental health career, including on-site wastewater treatment, school, childcare, vector, swimming pools, and of course, retail food. He's been conducting standardization exercises for his entire career with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, is one of only 2 inspectors in Colorado that are standardized by the FDA. Our second panelist is Julie Kraling. Julie has worked for the Iowa Department of Inspection and Appeal since 2006. She spent 9 years as a field inspector, and since 2015, Julie has been the retail food program lead and is responsible for new inspector training, quality assurance assessments of field inspectors and regional supervisors, standardizations, and ongoing training and guidance. In addition, Julie also completes program standard self-assessment and verification audits. Prior to working for the Department of Inspections and Appeals, Julie worked for the Iowa Department of Public Health for 18 months. And prior to that, she spent 12 years in the restaurant industry as a supervisor and training coordinator for a major franchise in the US. And our third and final panelist is Mary Marietta. Mary is a senior environmental health specialist with the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department, where she has worked for 6 of her 12 years in regulatory capacity, the last 3 years as their training and standardization officer. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to our panelists. Use your Zoom reactions or chat to show your appreciation for each of them being here today. And Matt, I will turn it over to you to kick us off.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about our program. So standardization in Colorado, what I'm going to kind of the brief overview of this, I'm going to talk about the past, the present, the future of kind of what we're doing in regards to standardization in Colorado. Oh. Okay, brief overview. So overview of the overview. Our program in Colorado is probably a little different from a lot of the other state programs. Most of the retail food programs in Colorado are at the local level, and our CDPHE team is actually pretty small. We have 9 people on our team, and we only regulate directly about 6 of the counties in Colorado. Every other county are regulated by the local public health agencies. So overview of standardization obviously starts at the FDA. And then in terms of CDPHE, we have 2 people standardized by FDA, and of course I am one of those. And then 6 of our staff are standardized internally by of course, people that are standardized by FDA. And then our local public health agencies, we have approximately 45 staff standardized by CDPHE, and then about 120 staff standardized internally within those agencies. So we're at approximately 167 local public health agency standardized folks. So now go into a little bit of the past of our standardization program. So in 2019, we adopted the 2013 food code, which is where we are right now. Prior to that, we were on a very Colorado specific regulation, which was very loosely based on, I think, the 2005 food code, something like that, but it wasn't really very close to that. And then at the same time, along with the food code adoption, we adopted the current FDA standardization model, which includes the workbook and the procedures manuals. Prior to that, we didn't really have specific forms or really specific procedures in place. We tried to model as best we could the standardization that we got from FDA, which I mean, in terms of what we were doing, and I think we did a pretty good job. We also didn't really have specific forms. So what we did at the time was we used just one of our paper inspection forms as our main form for conducting those standardizations. So present, next few slides, we'll be talking about that, kind of the present of our standardization program. So just in terms of the number of inspections during standardization, I think this is similar to what most folks are doing. So we're doing 8 inspections and then 6 for the re-standardization for those folks that we standardize either on our own team or at the local level that are going to standardize other people. And then 4 inspections for those food safety inspection officers. What we mean by that is that they don't get to standardize other people. Pre-standardization. So what does that mean? So that's something that we've used in Colorado for a really long time. That is kind of a way of it accomplishes a couple different things. It's a way for us to assess whether our candidates are ready for standardization, and also gets them a little bit more used to the forms and the procedures manual, because they are still fairly new in Colorado. And they're, of course, as everybody knows, they're different than the normal stuff that you use during inspections. So what does that look like? It's a training exercise. Generally, we're doing joint inspections with our candidates. Typically, it is outside of the standardization exercise. So it's a time, before that. And we've had a lot of really good success using that method. Again, we're making sure that those folks are ready, so we can kind of call things off or get them some more training before standardization. And also we're getting them ready by introducing them to the documents. Sometimes it's optional, right? So if we're doing a re-standardization and a candidate did really well the first go around, then we may not require that. And again, it's been part of standardization in Colorado for a really long time, probably way more than 10 years. I don't know exactly how long. So training to the test, what does that mean? So I think a lot of us have experienced this, right? We're standardizing a candidate. They don't do super well at the beginning, but through the course of the exercise, they get incrementally better and better, so that at the end you're like, well, okay, I guess you're doing okay. You pass now. So what we have found over time is that doesn't really work as a way of kind of changing our candidates' behavior, right? If we're saying that they're not quite ready, then they're probably not going to take those changes, that feedback during standardization and make it a long-term part of how they're doing things. So what we're doing now is we try to kind of assess readiness, or if they're ready for standardization close to the beginning of standardization, and then if we say no, you're not quite ready, then we shift modes to training. Spend the same amount of time that we were going to spend with them, but we're just doing training instead of standardization. And then we, after that time, we give them at least a month, something like that, to change on their own, and then we kind of start it all over again and see if things have changed. I think it works. Like I said, I think it's working well in terms of trying to get those long-term changes for those candidates that are kind of on the bubble. Standardization as a program assessment tool. So what does that mean? So what we're doing in Colorado is we're using standardization kind of as a way of comparing our inspection data. So we're talking about things like percentage of time violations are cited, average number of violations, stuff like that, to what we are seeing when we're there with a candidate. So very rarely we've seen very significant discrepancies between what we see when we're doing standardization and what we see just based on the stats that we have from our data system. And we have, again, very rarely used that as justification to fail a standardization exercise, because we're saying that they're not quite conducting inspections the way they were trained, or good risk-based inspections kind of when they're alone. And then we've also used that to inform some of our contract decisions, since all of our local public health agencies in Colorado do have a contract to conduct their inspection activities through us at CDPHE. Pervasiveness. So this is a really kind of a complicated topic, but in a nutshell, we now have in Colorado an enforcement system that's based on points, and along with the points, each violation is assessed a pervasiveness, either low, medium, or high. And basically, again, in a nutshell, it's how bad a violation is compared to how bad it could be, with some other stuff kind of built in there, like maybe if it was a repeated violation, or if they had some historic issues, those things considered. So again, very complicated topic, pervasiveness, very subjective, difficult to achieve consistency. But the reason it's in this presentation, right, is we are having that as a discussion item during when we're kind of going through the inspection at the end of each one during standardization. So we are using that as more of a training opportunity to discuss that. So when we're going through the workbook, it's just, yeah, tell me what pervasiveness you think that out violation was. And it doesn't affect the outcome of standardization. It's really more for training, because it is still a fairly new concept in Colorado. And it's, again, very difficult to achieve consistency. So we're using that as an opportunity to talk about it. Risk-based inspection focus. I think that's probably, in my opinion at least, probably the biggest change in the past 10 years in Colorado is we've really tried to switch gears away from the code compliance focused standardization and more towards really just risk-based inspection methods. It's difficult, of course, right? Because in any kind of inspection methods, conversation is very qualitative, not quantitative. So it's hard to build that into a good process when there's not, you can't say, oh, you missed this many or, whatever. So it's difficult to build that in, but it is working, right? And I think that probably risk-based inspection methods is one of our biggest reasons, either at the beginning of standardization or when we're doing our pre-standardization, the biggest reason that we would say you're not quite ready because they don't have good risk-based inspection methods. Future. So one of the things that's coming down the road for us in Colorado is in terms of how we're standardizing our local public health agencies. So we're currently considering a change from standardizing some standardization officers in our local public health agencies who would then standardize internal staff to the CDPHE staff standardizing all of the local public health agencies. We've gotten some feedback that's led us towards this from a lot of our medium to small size local public health agencies, saying that standardization for them internally is a very difficult thing because if they have 4 staff, they're maybe doing it one time a year, as opposed to the staff on my team, which are doing it once a month or once every couple months. And it also, depending on the way our local public health agencies are organized, it can be very difficult for one staff member to give maybe some difficult feedback to another staff member that's kind of at the same level. We've had that feedback. We also understand that training can be difficult in terms of that and things like that. We also we are seeing it from a CDPHE standpoint as a way of being more involved in the training of all of the food safety inspection officers in Colorado, because we knew in some of our larger local public health agencies, there are staff that were not trained or standardized by anybody on the CDPHE team. So we're using that as an opportunity as well. So we are piloting that change this year with some newly formed local public health agencies in the metro area, the Denver metro area. So we're standardizing about 50% more this year than we have in previous years. And then if we did fully implement that, it would very likely require more staff on the CDPHE team. And that is it. I think for questions, I think we're waiting. Is that right?
Yeah.
Becky?
Yes. Thank you very much, Matt. Great presentation. Very interesting concept of pervasiveness. Wonderful. Get any questions about that? If you all do have any questions for Matt about what he discussed and shared with what's happening in Colorado, please feel free to drop those in chat. We will have a few minutes left at the end of this panel discussion time to go over questions with our panelists. But now we're going to move to Julie in Iowa and have her present for us.
Okay, my name is Julie Kraling, and I'm the Retail Food Program Lead with the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals. And I've got someone else running my slides, so I'll be saying next when I'm ready to go. So if you can go to the next one. We have a lot of similarities to Colorado, it sounds like. So a lot of what I'll be saying is very similar to what you just heard, but we currently in the state of Iowa have 67 inspectors. So the Department of Inspections and Appeals currently has 3 standards for 24 inspectors. And our current needs for standards, we need 2 more. we contract out with local public health agencies and we are responsible for standardizing their standards, and then their standards will standardize their inspectors. So the areas in the map of Iowa here, the areas in white is DIA's, the Department of Inspections and Appeals. That's our jurisdiction. So we're kind of all over the state, and then we will go out to those local agencies and work with them for their standards as well. So the 3 standards that we currently have in Iowa is myself and then our 2 regional inspection supervisors. Our supervisors are responsible for training and doing the standardizations for DIA staff only. So the current needs that we have, those are the standardization officers that will go out to the local contract agencies and work with their folks. So next. So my personal role as the retail food program lead and doing the standardizations, I will do the standardizations of our regional supervisors. And then I also will help our supervisors if they need help doing the initial and the restandardizations of our own inspectors. And then with our local contract agencies, I will do the initial standardization with any of their new standardization officers. And then I'll also help with the restandardizations. I also will do the coordinating of the standardizations for our department. I have a 4-year schedule built out to help space them out so they're at a manageable level. A few years ago, it was very heavy where we would have, 8 or 9 or even up to 10 standardizations in 1 year, and then maybe only 1 the next year, 1 the following year. So over the last few years, we've spaced them out and rescheduled them, done them a little early at times, so we can have them on a more consistent and rotating basis. So right now, they're anywhere from 4 to 5 per year. So it's much more manageable for us to get out there and do those. And then I also track all of the standardizations for compliance with our retail standards. So I make sure that our department, that everyone is being standardized within their first 18 months, which now is 24 months. So that will help a little bit. And then I make sure that with the standardization officers for our local county contracts, that they're also being standardized within the appropriate time frame as well. And then my other duty is training the new standards. So as I said earlier, we have a need for 2 more. So once we identify who those people are, I'll be working on a training program for them to ensure that they know what their new role will be and how to conduct those standardizations. So next. So the number of inspections that we do, very similar to Colorado, for the standardization officers, the initial standardization, they'll do 8 inspections, and for restandardization, we do 6. If we're standardizing a standard, that person has to be standardized by the FDA. So currently in Iowa, myself and then one of our regional inspection supervisors is standardized by the FDA. Once we identify our 2 new people, they will be standardized by the FDA. And then our inspectors, it's 4 and 4. So 4 for their initial standardization and 4 for the restandardization. And next. So for records, we try to keep records for each, after each standardization. We work off of the FDA standardization model. So we want to ensure that we're keeping the records, keeping the final scoring sheets, the list of facilities that we go to, the times that we go to those facilities, the list of where we conducted the HACCP reviews and did the flow charts and the other things that go along with it. We keep those records and upload those into our Absorb LMS. So we have them available at any time we need to look at them and reference them. The main reason why we keep these records is to ensure that we are not continuously going back to the same facilities and conducting standardizations at the same facilities. We try and switch up the facilities, we switch up the times that we're going. We want to make sure that we're not seeing the same things time after time after time. Otherwise, people get into their ruts, and standardization becomes kind of easy when you're doing the same thing all the time. So when we switch it up, it keeps the challenge alive, and that's how we can really determine if we're doing the right thing. And next. So with our 2 new candidates that we're looking for, what we're really looking for in a new standardization officer, we understand this is a very unique position to be in. So we need someone who not only is knowledgeable of the food code and the report marking instructions, and someone who is knowledgeable of the standardization procedure, but they need to be someone who is able to build a rapport with the candidate that they're standardizing. They need to be a resource for that candidate, as well as for other inspectors. Our standardization officers who we have had in the past that have worked with our local contracting agencies, those people that they work with, the standard is getting phone calls all the time, not just when they're conducting a standardization, but all year long. So we really need someone who can make that connection with the people that they're standardizing, so they feel comfortable with them and are able to reach out when they have questions. And to do that, they need to be able to train people. They need to be able to coach people through the standardization process and coach them through the food code and the marking instructions and the public health reasonings behind the codes. The standardization officers and the candidates that we're looking for, they themselves have to be able to be coachable. We need to be able to ensure that they're doing the right thing and doing it consistently time after time. And one of the more important things is we need someone who wants to do it too. We don't have a lot of inspectors in the state of Iowa, so they're run pretty thin, and they have a lot of other responsibilities. So to put this on their plate, in addition to everything else that they do, we really need someone who's passionate about it and who wants to do it. And then someone who will hold the candidate accountable. So someone who has the ability to correct behavior and point things out to people without being overbearing or doing it in a way that's offensive. It's got to be someone who can really hold them accountable and do it in a way where the candidate is going to learn and going to be able to do their own standardizations with their candidates back in their agencies. So it is a process. Once we find our candidates, then we will really work on the training with them.
$30.
But it's like that with every agency that's out there when they are of our locals. They have turnover as well, and they look for candidates to step in as a new standardization officer for their agencies. And we kind of go through the same thing with them. So, and it's all about consistency. We want every standardization officer in the state of Iowa to do things the same way, so they can work with every inspector in the state. So there's consistency all the way through from start to finish and top to bottom. And that's what we do in Iowa.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was an excellent presentation. I really liked what you shared about your record keeping strategy and how you use that for the site selection of the facilities where you go for standardization. I think you gave some really practical and applicable tips for our audience today. So thank you so much for sharing. Our next presenter is Mary Marietta from Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department in Nebraska. And Mary, I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. First off, I'd like to say thank you for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity to discuss our program and how we approach standardization, especially at the local level, as we are the local jurisdiction here within the state of Nebraska. One thing I wanted to say was, if you guys haven't had the opportunity to go to the conversations tab, I would strongly encourage you to do that. There are some really great stories, especially over the grossest things that some of us may have seen out in the field. So I always like to think that the retail food protection seminar, this is my reminder that we're all in the same boat. There have been some really great questions throughout all of the seminars that have been held today. I sat in and kind of jumped back and forth between all of the different areas, and it's just been great to see. This is how we continually learn. You know, we're all in the same boat. Oh, well, how's this jurisdiction approaching this problem? How's that jurisdiction approaching that problem? So it's always it's fun to see. All right. So again, my name is Mary Marietta. I am a senior environmental health specialist with the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department. I am their training and standardization officer now. I've been with this jurisdiction for about 6 years now. 3 to 4, I guess, almost 4, have been that training and standardization officer. Prior to moving to Nebraska, I was in the city of Laramie in Wyoming. Again, another local jurisdiction. And when I was in Wyoming, it was great. I relied on the Wyoming Department of Agriculture for my standardization out there, along with a couple of the other local jurisdictions in that state, just to kind of get my feet wet and figure out what's going on. So Lincoln-Lancaster County, we have a population of about 325,000 people. We have approximately 1,300 food establishments. And right now we have 9 food safety inspectors. Within our group, I believe we're very fortunate. Most of our staff, if they're in the food safety program, they conduct food inspections. We do still have some side gigs within that. Within our division, we do take care of body art and the child care centers in town. Others in our division, they take care of water, so wells, pools, spas. We have an air program, and we also have a solid waste program. But again, we're very fortunate. Our food safety staff, this is pretty much what we do, minus some other inspection duties. So our program overview, we are contracted with the state of Nebraska Department of Agriculture. Through that, they are standardized, just like in Colorado and in Iowa. They are standardized by the FDA. The state standardizes me, and then I'm the one who standardizes my staff here at the health department. So as we go through our hiring program, pretty much from hiring through standardization, in my mind, that is a big key component for standardization, because you have to get the building blocks. You have to have that solid foundation and understanding of the food code in order to go through standardization properly. We do require the college credits, math courses, science courses. Our staff are required to sit for the REHS. And I apologize, it looks like I'm getting an unstable internet connection. I hope we're doing okay.
We still hear and
so
see you okay.
I hope we're good. We're going.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay, perfect. So we do require those components to sit for the REHS after 2 years of being an inspector, if they haven't had any prior experience. So when an individual is hired on, we do have our internal policy and procedure over training. I kind of like to say it's a shortened training time frame. I know within the FDA training and standardization, they've even extended that even further from 18 months to 24 months. Per our policy and procedure, our staff have to be standardized within 12 months. So the first 3 to 4 months, is really spent going through the Appendix B1, the online curriculum, which I have to say, I love the new format. I love the way it looks. It's much clearer. It's more concise. There's really no question as to when do we have to do these courses prior to doing anything else. So I appreciate it. I like it. We do start out with 25 shadowing inspections. That way our new hire goes out with an experienced staff member to see how inspections are conducted, gives them a chance to actually get out into the field a little bit, see how we do things, check out our inspection program, how to start working that out. As they're going through those first 25 shadowing inspections, they are completing some of those online courses. After that 25 shadowing inspections, then we do 25 joint inspections. So they'll still go out with an experienced staff member, but they're the ones driving the ship. They're going to be conducting the inspections. We're just there kind of as the moral support and kind of the adult supervision. Make sure that they're looking at things appropriately, addressing things appropriately. Hey, we might want to go and make sure we get a corrective action on this. Good job asking these questions. And it just gives them that little push out of the nest. Finally, they do have the 25 independent inspections. And those ones they're out on their own. We're only a phone call away, so they can always give us a call back to the office and say, hey, I ran into something, because we always run into something. So it's great to have the staff. We all rotate through. All of our senior staff do help out with that. So within our training program, like I said, we follow Standard 2 pretty well. We have the online courses. We follow the CFP training manual. We talk about the differences between the model food code and our local food code and the state food code. We're looking for those risk-based inspections as we go through. So some of the challenges with training, just like everybody else, especially during COVID, we've had some staff turnover. We've had people who've retired. We do have individuals who pursued different career paths. And sometimes we have had those staff members where they feel that the enforcement actions aren't necessarily for them, and enforcement isn't necessarily for everybody. So our probationary period is 6 months, and it's a two-way street. It gives them a chance to see if this is something they want to pursue, gives us a chance to make sure that they are able to be trained appropriately, are wanting to do the job as those challenges present themselves. Challenges with training and standardization. I believe Julie mentioned that time constraints. We have our other job duties within the department, and just trying to find that time to get together can be difficult. I also like to look at the staff background. Have they ever been in a restaurant before? Have they worked in a facility with food? Do they have inspection background? How are they coming from a different jurisdiction for us? So it's something that I take into consideration when I'm taking them out into the field, just to see where they stand. Finding the appropriate teaching style. Everybody learns differently. And I want to make sure that we're giving them the information that they need, when they need it and how they need it, to make sure that they are successful within the position. We always have that human factor. We're never going to get rid of the human factor. Even though we can say we're standardized, we should be able to go out and look at facilities the same way. We're never going to get rid of that human factor. But what can we do to kind of fix that? What can we do to break some bad habits, misguidances, or biases, and bring everybody so at least we're kind of within that standard deviation? Another challenge that I have found is going digital. Our documentation, trying to keep track of all the trainings people have gone through, whether here or in other jurisdictions. Just making sure that I have all of that together, so when we do go through the standard 2 and have that verified, I can make sure that I give that jurisdiction who's reviewing our program the proper information, the correct information, updated information. Benefits of training. We are looking for that more uniform inspection program. Yes, there's going to be the human factor. Yes, there are going to be those differences among staff, but we should be able to go out. We should be able to look at things at least within the same purview. We should be going out and doing risk-based inspections, asking those questions, digging a little bit deeper than just the superficial yes and no questions. You cooled this properly, correct? Oh yeah, always. How do you cool? Can you show me how you cool? Dig a little bit deeper, guys. Try to find those issues, those problems. We ourselves need to have that better understanding of the food code, the reasonings behind it. It is risk-based inspection process, but we also have the education factor. Active managerial control is becoming the new catchphrase. How are we going to go about that active managerial control? How can we help our establishments become better? We need to have a mastery of what we do and how we do it, why we do it, to be able to lead our facility operators, our managers into those better practices, helping them change the human factors and those behaviors within their establishments. It also helps us identify gaps for training for our inspectors. You know, what can we do better? How can we help our inspectors? Is there something that we're missing? So going through those standardization inspections, even reviewing reports will help kind of guide us as to, hey, you know what, maybe we're seeing an increase in these violations. Okay, what's going on? Or, hey, I noticed that you like to document this as a violation on all your things. Nobody else is. You know, what's going on? Or, hey, I like that you documented that they had this problem going on. Maybe not the best code reference to use for that. Let's go take a look at this. So that's going to help with that, the open communication amongst our inspectors to make sure that we're all kind of looking at things the same way. We're at least getting kind of within the ballpark for those violations and what needs to be referenced. So lessons learned. Program improvement. I mean, overall, the standards program is for general overall program improvement. We want to keep moving forward. We're going to have setbacks every now and then, and that's okay. We just need to know and realize that those are going to happen, and how are we going to approach those once we learn that they are happening. We want to make sure that we have that constant reassessment of our own program, policies and procedures. Go back and read the standards. Are we doing standardization correctly? Is there something that we missed in the CFP standardization guide? Is there something that we missed within standard 2? Oh, shoot, you know what? I don't think we've done this. We should probably get on that. Again, everybody learns differently. You know, the ultimate goal that we're looking for is protecting the public's health. And how are we going to go about that? Another thing is that training is constant. And it's also part of standard 2, that continuing education, which we're all here for. We're all getting credits for this. How can we take those lessons and implement them back into our own programs? Great resource, our FDA specialists. Get in contact with them. If you have another jurisdiction that you can contact them, see what they're doing, see how they're doing it, and get that information that you need. So other than that, I'll leave my contact information. You're more than welcome to give me a phone call, shoot me an email. If you have questions, if you're a local jurisdiction, you're like, hey, you know what? I don't even know where to start. Start with your FDA retail specialist. They should be able to point you in the right direction. Worst case, give me that phone call, shoot me that email. I'd be more than happy to help you along with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was great information. I think that the training challenges that you shared in many jurisdictions here in attendance today can definitely relate. I appreciate all 3 of our panelists sharing today what their jurisdictions are doing with standardization. And I hope that those on the call, whether they are in the process of developing their standardization programs or have existing well-developed standardization programs, we're able to take something away from it. We do have just about 2 or 3 minutes for some questions. There were a few that came in chat. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, but for sure, please use in Pathable in the seminar platform. There is the inbox and the chat board feature. Get in touch with the panelists if there's any questions that were unanswered that you would like to know more. But Matthew, if you could, I'd like to direct the first question to you. Somebody had asked, is pre-standardization done during routine inspections, or do you schedule separate visits to restaurants for those pre-standardization?
So it depends. It's really up to what the candidate wants, but usually, yeah, they're regular regulatory inspections. we just kind of go with them. It's more, I mean, just think of it as your typical kind of standard 2 training type of a thing. If you had a new inspector, it's very similar.
Thank you. And we had another question that came in. Does anyone use a tiered type of approach towards standardization? For example, evaluating inspectors in a lower risk establishment in a manner similar to standardization. And then once they pass or graduate, I guess that hurdle, then continue their training towards standardization.
I think with just our basic training, we'll start at kind of those lower risk establishments and then build up. But for standardization, we try to stick to those more complex areas because we want to see how our inspectors handle asking those risk-based inspection questions, trying to not just scratch the surface, but dig down deep, just to make sure that, you know, the staff, not just the managers at the facilities, but the staff understand what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Okay, and maybe one more question. Is anyone having issues getting buy-in from staff or maybe for the state agencies from local jurisdictions to get standardized?
In Colorado, they don't really have a choice. Unfortunately, it's written into their contract that they have to get standardized. But I will say that it's been challenging to have a process that's not really that doesn't result in the candidates getting really nervous ahead of time. We try the best we can to make it as low key as possible, even though it is an assessment of how they're doing their inspections. But yeah, it can be challenging to get buy-in, but we're still navigating that. But I think it's gotten better for our program over time. But yeah, it's just a challenge that we're working on.
I think sometimes it can feel like an inconvenience for our staff. It is something that it takes us away from maybe other job duties, like if they had childcares that they were going to go hit, or I do hazmat. So if there's something that I was going to go do, I may have to push that back. Or if I get called out for a hazmat, I got to go. We have to stop the exercise at that point. So sometimes it can feel like an inconvenience, but like Matt said, we are expected to do it. It is part of our job duty.
Absolutely. Julie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that no, but I don't think anybody likes to do it. I like to do it, but I don't think anyone who's being standardized likes to be standardized. But all of our inspectors in Iowa know that it is, it's just part of the job. It's part of their training. It's part of their ongoing, continuing training. And, it makes us better. So buy-in, they all buy into it 100%. They just don't like to do it.
Well, again, thank you all so much for presenting to us today. We really appreciate your perspective and your time. And at this point, it's the top of the hour. I'm going to turn it over to Kwanzaa Duggan. She's a retail food specialist, and she's going to introduce our next presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Our next presentation will be an introduction to food ingredient regulation for retail by Dr. Katie Overby. Dr. Overby is a regulatory review scientist and microbiology reviewer in FDA's Office of Food Additive Safety. Dr. Overby holds a bachelor's in environmental science from UNC Chapel Hill, a master's in food science from North Carolina State, and a PhD in environmental health from Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Overby's scientific interests include food and waterborne pathogens, and her past work includes measuring antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the beach waters of the Galapagos Islands, studying consumer attitudes towards food safety using Twitter, and developing methods to detect norovirus in the environment. Her current work involves evaluating the safety and regulatory compliance of food ingredients, including reviewing food additive petitions and GRAS program notices. So please welcome Dr. Overby. The screen is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me share my slides. Fabulous. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here at the prime nap time, at least where I am in Baltimore on the East Coast. And today I'm going to be talking about an introduction to food ingredient regulation for retail. I'm currently a regulatory review scientist in the Division of Food Ingredients. So I work on food additives and GRAS ingredients. So first, a brief outline. I'm going to give a really brief kind of look into the history of food ingredient regulation in the United States. It's helpful to kind of root the discussion in kind of where do these regulations come from? And then we're going to do everybody's favorite. We're going to go through some regulatory definitions of ingredients, additives, and GRAS substances. And then we're going to talk about how the FDA reviews food ingredients and the processes for all of this. And so the hope is that this sort of look at the regulatory side of additives will help give you the tools to, when you're out in the field, understand if an ingredient that you're looking at is regular or is approved for its use. And I want to say, at the top, I will not be discussing dietary supplements. Dietary supplements and food additives are handled by separate offices in the FDA. And so I will not be talking on dietary supplements. I will, however, at the end of the presentation, provide the correct contact information for the Office of Dietary Supplements programs, so that if you encounter those when you're in the field, you have someone you can reach out to. So a brief history of US food additive regulation. So the very first thing really was the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. This was really the first time that the country had attempted to codify any sort of food safety anything. And then in 1938 was the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or the FD&C Act. And the FD&C, as it sounds, covers drugs, cosmetics, food, and food ingredients. And this really sort of established what is now the current framework. We still use the FD&C Act, sometimes just referred to as the Act. It has obviously been updated since 1938, but that is where it originated. And then in 1958, the Food Additives Amendment was put in, and this is really what governs most of what I'll be discussing today. So the Food Additives Amendment defined what a food additive was and also provided a provision for the generally recognized as safe or GRAS substances. It also required that pre-market approval be undertaken for any new uses of food additives. And it also established the standard of safety, standard of review, and formal rulemaking procedures around food additives. And just another thing of note, 1960, the Color Additive Amendment came along and did something very similar for color additives. And so when we talk about the different regulations in the United States, where all these things are, how the process works, we kind of have these three silos. So the first thing is the statute itself, which is the FD&C Act. This is the thing that was enacted by Congress. It establishes the legal framework within which the FDA operates, and it can be found in the United States Code. It's very dry. I don't recommend it, but you can read the FD&C Act if you're so inclined. The sort of next step from that is regulation, and this will be found in the Code of Federal Regulations, which I will discuss more in depth. And the way this works is the FDA publishes rules that implement the law. So the FDA takes the FD&C Act and publishes rules that implement the Act statutes. And then the FDA publishes rules for both food and color additives. And then the other category is guidance, which will be found in FDA guidance documents. And the FDA, in order to produce these, follows good guidance practice regulation in order to issue guidance documents. It describes the agency's thinking on a regulatory issue, but it is not legally binding on the public or on the FDA. And you can find guidance documents on the FDA website. So now I want to talk briefly about the Code of Federal Regulations. Oh, and I've been told that I just saw that my controls are showing. Let me hide them. Mm, 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 mm. How do I hide them? Sorry, I can't figure out how to hide the controls. If someone knows how, please message me and I'll fix that. I
Yeah,
apologize.
just a question, Dr. Lee, what you might try a new share and only share the PowerPoint presentation window.
It was under there.
I did only share. I'm only sharing the PowerPoint presentation window.
It was on that
The
list.
controls.
Hide floating controls.
Where does that live?
Under more, you were right on, almost there.
Ah, incredible. Thank you. Sorry about that. Wonderful. Let's continue. So I want to sort of dial in onto the Act and the CFR, because in terms of, where are these regulations coming from? Where can you start to look for if an ingredient is authorized for its intended use? These are sort of this underpinning. So as I mentioned, the FD&C Act, sometimes just called Act, gives the FDA the legal authority to regulate food and food ingredients. In order to fulfill the provisions of the FD&C Act, the FDA develops regulations. And these regulations are first published in the Federal Register as proposed rules. And you can find this at regulations.gov. And that includes, again, the proposed rules, and then published rules are found in the Code of Federal Regulations, which is at ecfr.gov. And this is where all the food regulations that are in practice are going to be found. And in general, food regulations will be located in Title 21. And I want to take a minute to talk about how to navigate the CFR, because the CFR is where all of the underpinning regulations are found. It's where all the approved food additives, all the approved color additives are listed. Things get a little tricky when we start to talk about GRAS substances, but I'll address that in a little bit. But so the first thing is, so you can navigate it at ecfr.gov. If you're a nerd, they recently revamped the whole website, and it's actually pretty nice. It's searchable, which is fabulous. And it follows a consistent naming scheme. So for example, this is the list out of where you would find information on spices and other natural seasonings and flavors that are considered generally recognized as safe. So Title 21, Subchapter B, Part 182, Section 10. And the way that's written looks like this. So if you see CFR references, the first number is going to be the title, and then it's going to have CFR and everyone's favorite little section symbol. And then it's going to show the part and the section. And so it's just a helpful way to sort of understand the codifying of where all this stuff is located, and give you the tools to access that resource and navigate it and identify the information you need within it. So the next thing I want to talk about is the statutory definitions. So the first thing is, how does the FD&C define a food additive? I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. You're welcome to find it in the Act and read it yourself. But effectively, a food additive can be defined as any substance added to food. And, pretty straightforward. However, there will be sort of exceptions to this that we will start to get into. Now, the first thing is the FDA and the CFR make a distinction between direct and indirect additives. So direct food additives, which are defined in 21 CFR Part 172, are substances that are added to food for a specific purpose or technical effect. And most direct food additives would be, things that you put on the label. So sweeteners, preservatives, things like that. Then you have secondary food additives, which are substances that are added during manufacturing or processing. And these are additives that are not intended to remain in the food after the technical effect has been accomplished. So examples could be release agents, as well as boiler water additives. And then the third category is indirect food additives. And these are substances that become part of the food in trace amounts due to package, storage, or other handling. And I'm not going to cover indirect additives today, but some examples include paper, plastics, and adhesives. In terms of the regulatory structure, indirect additives are handled through the Food Contact Notification Program, and that has been in existence since 1999. And I will provide their contact information at the end of my talk as well. And so, the FD&C Act has defined what a food additive is, but there are exceptions. And to sort of underpin all of this, the purpose of that legal definition of a food additive is to impose a pre-market approval requirement. However, some additives have other legal pre-market approval requirements, and while others actually are excluded from that pre-market approval requirement. So color additives have a different set of pre-market approval requirements. Pesticides are handled by the EPA, animal drugs that may remain in food, and dietary ingredients in dietary supplements. All four of these have different pre-market approval requirements than food additives. And then there's prior sanctioned ingredients, which are excluded from the pre-market approval requirements. GRAS substances are also excluded from the pre-market approval requirements, but they're a kind of very nuanced section. So they're going to get their own section later. So we're not going to talk about them too in depth. So prior sanctioned ingredients, these are found in 21 CFR 181. And these ingredients are excluded from the definition of food additive and therefore the pre-market approval requirements. These ingredients are substances whose there's the subject of a letter issued by the FDA or the USDA before 1958 offering no objection to specific use of a specific substance. And so prior sanctioned ingredients are more or less effectively were intended to be sort of a grandfathering in when that 1958 Food Additive Amendment was put in place. And as with all of these additives, all of the approvals that we talk about, it's specific to the use of the substance, which includes both the level, the conditions, and the products for which that substance is used. And the list that is in the CFR is subject to amendment if any use is shown to be injurious to health based on scientific data. And now we're going to start talking about GRAS. So generally recognized as safe, or GRAS, is discussed in 21 CFR 182. And GRAS ingredients are accepted from the definition of a food additive if a substance is generally recognized among qualified experts as having been adequately shown to be safe under the conditions of its intended use. And the use of an ingredient may be GRAS either through scientific procedures or for a substance used in food before 1958, their experience based on common use in food. So under the Act, food ingredients may either be a food additive or a GRAS substance. And the way this all came about is when they were defining a food additive, Congress made it clear that the agency shouldn't devote resources to evaluating substances for which there is expert consensus about the safe use of the ingredient. So to address this, that 1958 Food Additive Amendment included a provision to a provision within the food additive definition for GRAS substances. And it's referred to as the GRAS provision, and I will get very in-depth on GRAS later in this talk. But first, we're going to go through the food additive and color additive approval process in the United States. So for a food additive, the regulatory process for getting a new food additive or a new use of a food additive approved is what's called a food additive petition. So to market a new food additive or before using an approved additive for a new intended use, a manufacturer must submit a petition that proposes a regulation that prescribes the conditions under which that additive may be used, or they can submit an amendment to an existing regulation. The petition must include, I apologize, my dog has opinions about food additive petitions, apparently. A petition must include an assertion of facts supported by data showing that new information exists with respect to the food additive, or that new uses have been developed or old uses abandoned. And food additive petitions, the kind of long and short of it is they must provide evidence that the substance is safe for its intended uses. And if you're interested in looking into the specific requirements, I apologize, one moment. He's very angry that the mail is coming. So if you're interested in looking at the specific specific requirements for a food additive petition, 21 CFR 171.1 lists out all of the requirements for a food additive petition. Effectively, a food additive petition needs to lay out the identity of the new ingredient, the proposed use, the amount to be used, the date establishing intended effect, how the ingredient is analyzed, full reports of safety studies, proposed tolerances, and also environmental information. And I just want to emphasize, I'm going to emphasize this a lot, all of these regulatory pathways are specific to use. They are not just an ingredient. So whenever we talk about food additive petitions, color additive petitions, GRAS substances, everything is specific to use. So it's the ingredient as well as the products it's going to be used in and the level it's used at. And the other petition process is for color additives. So that 1960 Color Additives Amendment to the Act established pre-market approval requirements for color additives and a process for submitting color additive petitions. Color additive petitions are very similar to food additive petitions. I'm not, again, going to read you this super long regulatory definition, but I am going to take a moment to talk about identifying color additives. So there can be some nuance in identifying color additives. It's really about the intention for adding the ingredient. So ingredients that do contribute color, but it's their natural color, are exempt from color additives. So, if you're making cherry juice, that cherry is not going to be considered a color additive because the product is being marketed as cherry juice and the cherries are giving it color. However, if you're making pink lemonade and you're using beet juice to color it, now you're using an ingredient not as kind of its function, and you're using the color it imparts, and it is now a color additive. So in general, it is color additives are going to be things that are used for a purpose for coloring the product. And if you're going to say that something isn't a color additive, it has to be used in a way that any color imparted is clearly unimportant insofar as the appearance, value, marketability, or consumer acceptability is concerned. So back to the pink lemonade example, you're calling it pink lemonade. So the beet juice is important to the marketability of the ingredient, but it's not being used for any other purpose except color. So it would be a color additive. And the reason that this is important is that color additives have, again, that color additive petition process, but they are also not able to be subject to the GRAS provision. So if something is being used as a color, it must have a color additive petition. It cannot be considered GRAS. And I'll start to tease that out more later after we do a bit of a deep dive into GRAS ingredients. So GRAS ingredients, GRAS substances, they're the same thing. And GRAS notices are the process by which our agency reviews voluntarily submitted GRAS ingredient proposals. So food additives versus GRAS substances. So these are really the two big categories when we're talking about a food ingredient and what is regulating the presence of a food ingredient. So a food additive, you need to demonstrate evidence of safety. And so the Act dictates that the FDA approves the use of both direct and indirect food additives. And as I said, this may include a food additive petition that either proposes a new food additive regulation or an amendment to an existing food additive regulation. However, substances whose use meets the GRAS criteria do not require pre-market approval by FDA, as the use of an ingredient is GRAS because of widespread knowledge among a community of qualified experts, not because of a listing or other administrative activity. And so the big difference here is, so the food additive petition process requires demonstration of that evidence of safety. It requires that pre-market approval process. GRAS substances still require that evidence of safety, but they also require a general recognition of safety. So in order for an ingredient to be considered GRAS, generally recognized as safe, it needs to have the same safety demonstration, but there also needs to be general recognition. And the way this is achieved is through the general availability of safety data and information, and the general acceptance among the scientific community of the safety of that ingredient. For practical purposes, general recognition of safety is usually achieved via underpinning safety studies being available in peer-reviewed literature. And I want to emphasize, because I'm going to say it a lot of times, but both meet the same safety standard. Food additives and GRAS substances must meet the same meet the same safety standard, which is that there is reasonable certainty in the minds of competent scientists that the substance is not harmful under the intended conditions of use. And it's important to note that neither regulations, so food additive regulations, color additive regulations, or GRAS notices are licenses. This means that anyone who complies with the terms of the regulation or of the uses, specifications, and identity in a GRAS notice, which I'll discuss further, also may be covered without needing to come to the FDA. So they're not specific to any one company, they're specific to the use of an ingredient. And so to dig down more into this, so food additives are subject to pre-market review and approval by the FDA. They must come to the FDA with their safety information. It will get reviewed, and successful food additive petitions result in official rulemaking procedures. They get a regulation number, they end up in the CFR. However, if an ingredient meets the GRAS substances definition, they are not subject to pre-market review requirements of the Act. However, as I said, still subject to the same safety standard as food additives. And some GRAS substances are listed in parts 182, 184, and 186 of Title 21 in CFR. However, because GRAS substances are accepted from the pre-market review requirements, there's no official rulemaking with GRAS substances. So there's not a regulation number for a GRAS notice. It's not necessarily going to be in the CFR. Those GRAS substances that are listed in the parts 182, 184, and 186 are not a comprehensive list, because companies are not required to come through the FDA for review of a GRAS substance. And we will talk more at the end of my talk about how to handle this practically when you're in a retail setting and you're trying to figure out the regulatory status of an ingredient. And so as I mentioned, there's sort of these two components of GRAS. So there's the evidence of safety, which happens for both food additives and GRAS ingredients. And for GRAS ingredients, they have this general recognition of safety, which means that they're generally available and generally accepted. And the big important thing here is that any information that is critical to a GRAS conclusion of safety must be generally available. So it can't be confidential business information or things like that. And generally, the way that we assess this is publication in peer-reviewed journals or textbooks or scientific reports, and also evidence that there's consensus among the scientific community on that ingredient. And so, the law kind of requires the same quantity and quality of scientific evidence of safety for a food additive as well as a GRAS conclusion. But GRAS has this additional requirement because of the general recognition of safety. So if a manufacturer has all of this safety information and they choose to make a GRAS conclusion, they are under the law fully allowed to retain that information in their records and do nothing else with it. However, they may come to us through the GRAS notification program with a GRAS notice that contains information in support of the GRAS conclusion that they have made. Whether or not a manufacturer chooses to submit a GRAS notice to the FDA, the Act does require that they work to ensure that the use of their substance meets the same GRAS requirements prior to marketing the ingredient. And though the GRAS notification program is voluntary, we obviously encourage manufacturers to submit notices to our program. A key benefit of coming through the GRAS notification program is manufacturers receive a letter from the FDA, and we believe that our response can help ensure consumer confidence. So there are two ways for a manufacturer to kind of have a pathway to GRAS substance. The first is scientific procedures. And so this is based on using generally available and accepted scientific data to build a data-driven safety narrative for the ingredient and its use. There's also experience based on common use in food. This is pretty rare. It requires a substantial history of consumption for food use by a significant number of consumers. And so one of the reasons that this is usually not used anymore is because a lot of the ingredients that come through, GRAS notification program are new ingredients. That's why they're coming through the program. So there's not that underlying history of use. And this experience based on common use in food was again sort of a grandfathering tool when that 1958 Food Additive Amendment was passed. So it's really not going to be seen. Most GRAS conclusions are going to be based on scientific procedures. There's some important caveats for GRAS ingredients. As I've said, with food additives and color additives, everything is specific to use. So an ingredient on its own cannot be GRAS. This will never happen. It is specific to use level as well as the products. As I've said already, but it's very important to emphasize, GRAS notices are not mandatory. Companies are fully allowed under the law to maintain self-GRAS conclusions. However, the FDA advises that companies follow the GRAS documentation procedures that are laid out in what's called the GRAS final rule, even if they choose not to submit a notice. And that information is in the CFR. And an FDA response to a GRAS notice is not a regulation or an approval. It is not official rulemaking. What it does is it represents an opinion of the agency based on the GRAS conclusion. And as I mentioned earlier, but as is very important to emphasize, color additives cannot be GRAS. So if an ingredient is being used as a color additive, it cannot be GRAS. There must be a provision in the CFR for the use of that ingredient as a color additive. So very briefly, how do we, when a company does choose voluntarily to come through the FDA and get their GRAS notice evaluated, there's three outcomes. The first is called a no questions letter. This is your good day letter. This means that the FDA does not question the basis for the notifier's GRAS conclusion. The bad day letter is an insufficient basis. So this is the FDA concludes that the notice does not provide sufficient basis for a GRAS conclusion. And the third option is a cease to evaluate, where the notifier will request that the FDA cease its evaluation of the notice. And if applicable, letters may include a statement that some uses may require a color additive listing. So sometimes you may have an ingredient that has some uses that need to be covered under a GRAS notice, but if it's also being used as a color, it still needs to go through a color additive petition for that specific color use. And just to emphasize, all of these are opinion letters. So the good day letter, the no questions letter, is effectively the FDA saying, after we've reviewed this GRAS notice, it is our opinion that we have no additional questions about the company's current assertion of a GRAS status for their ingredient. It is not a license, it is not a regulation, despite some industry wanting to treat it that way. It is an opinion only. And so now I want to go through some resources and regulations. I'm going to flash this on the screen. Feel free to take a screenshot, take a picture. If you miss it, I can come back to it at the end. I don't want to hold us up on here, but these are going to be sort of where all these regulations are going to be found in the CFR. An important reminder that the generally recognized as safe, the GRAS ingredients in the CFR are not fully comprehensive. Just because an ingredient is not listed as GRAS in the CFR does not mean that it isn't GRAS. One option is to look at the GRAS inventory, which I'll link on the page, and I believe I provided that in the list of resources. But again, going through the GRAS notification program is optional for companies, so it may not always be there. And so this is, again, a bunch of resources. Again, you're welcome to take a picture. I can put this back on the screen after. I believe I did provide these links to the organizers. These are going to be a ton of different valuable resources. So the ECFR, the GRAS inventory. So that's where you're going to find all of the GRAS notices that have come through our program, the current opinions that we've issued on them. The SCOGS database is an older database that lists a couple hundred GRAS substances that were evaluated in the 60s. And so you can look for some GRAS ingredients there. There's a page to identify food and color additive petitions that are currently under review, but not in the CFR. Substance added to food inventory, again, not complete, but a good place to start. There are status lists for food additives and color additives. And, import alerts and warning letters can be valuable if you're, sort of trying to sleuth out the regulatory status of an ingredient. Those import alerts and those warning letters may give you some information. And then this page shows the contact information of sort of your different offices. We really encourage you to reach out to us if you're, out in the field and you're trying to figure out if an ingredient is regulated for its intended use, and you're just hitting a wall, please email us. That email is going to be the premarket@fda.hhs.gov. It'll be on my last slide as well, and I can throw it in the chat as well. Anything about food additives, GRAS substances, food contact substances goes to that pre-market inbox. We will get back to you. Please, please, please. We're happy to answer questions. Yes, it is spelled M-A-R-K-T. There is not a second E. I don't know why. It's not a typo. Some other important contact information is the General Food and Cosmetics Information Center. So this is for all of CIFSAN. They'll likely, if you submit through this inquiry, you're going to likely end up in the pre-market inbox, but it's a good place to start. The email for the FDA's retail foods program is here. And then if you have questions specifically about dietary supplements, the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs is who you're going to want to reach out to. And again, I cannot speak to the regulatory status of dietary supplements, as the regulatory pathway is different than food additives. If you believe that an ingredient is being used as a dietary supplement, or a retailer states that an ingredient is permitted as a supplement, please again reach out to ODSP. Again, we're happy to answer questions. We encourage you to reach out to us, and we're happy to help you figure these out. Some of this stuff is really complicated. Some of it doesn't have a clear-cut answer. So we're more than happy to help. And with my remaining time, I want to talk through a few examples and scenarios. So when you're talking about evaluating ingredients at retail, there's a couple places that you may encounter an ingredient that you have questions about. So the first thing would be, if you're looking at a food establishment plan review, you're doing a menu review, you come across an ingredient that raises some questions. There's also facility inspections where you come across an ingredient being added that you are trying to figure out. So the first step in the process is identifying the ingredient. And then once you have that ingredient identified, there are steps that you can take to start determining the regulatory status. So this flow chart, I've developed a flow chart that can help you sort of work through if an ingredient is authorized for its current use. This flow chart is a great starting place, but the regulatory landscape is really complicated, and not all the information is going to be easily accessible in the public domain. So when in doubt, please again, email us. I'll put that link up again, put it in the chat. Please reach out to us. So the first step is going to be identifying the ingredient and the use, because as I said, it's not just about the ingredient, it's also about the use. So what is it? As much information as you can get about the identity will be really helpful. And how is it being used? What level is it being used at? What is the retailer intending the effect of the ingredient to be in the product? And what products, what food categories is it being added to? The first question you're going to ask is the ingredient imparting color? If so, you need to look and see if it is listed as an approved color additive in 21 CFR 73 to 74. If it is not, that ingredient is very likely an unapproved color additive. And colors, there are some nuances, but even if the manufacturer says, well, we didn't, intend to impart color, it's doing something else. If the color is important for marketing, it would still be a color additive. So again, if you have doubts, please email us. Now, if you've asked, is the ingredient imparting color? And it is, and you found it's listed as an approved color additive, then yay, okay, it's an approved color additive. However, if there are other non-color uses, you still need to keep going. If there are not other non-color uses, then that ingredient use is likely authorized. However, if there are other non-color uses, or if the ingredient does not impart color, the first place you're going to want to look is under the approved food additives or prior sanctioned ingredients. And these are going to be found in 21 CFR 172 to 181. Your best bet when looking in the CFR is to just use the search function. If you go to that eCFR website, there's a search bar, you can type the ingredient name in. Sometimes you might need to, if there's like multiple different ways to name an ingredient, you can try a few different namings to make sure that you catch it. But this is going to be your first place to start if the ingredient's not being used as a color. You're going to look to see, is it an approved food additive or is it already approved for prior sanction? If it is, then that ingredient use is likely authorized. If you cannot find it, your next course of action is going to be looking into the CFR at those GRAS lists. So 21 CFR 182 and 184 list some ingredients that are affirmed as GRAS. This is a holdover of prior regulatory action. That's why it's not complete. It's the whole thing. But that will be your next step, is to look in the CFR there. If the ingredient is there, then it is likely authorized. If you can't find it, then your next step is going to be to go to that GRAS inventory. In the GRAS inventory maintained by the FDA, you can also search that by ingredient name. And if you find that the ingredient and its use is covered by a GRAS notice that received a no questions letter from the FDA, then again, that use is likely to be authorized. However, if you cannot identify a no questions letter, then it may be an approved additive, and we really suggest that you submit an inquiry to that pre-market inbox. Again, no second D. And the reason that this says may is because there are some complexities here, namely being that companies are allowed to maintain their own GRAS conclusion. So if you reach out to us, we can help you identify if there's any more information to the regulation of that ingredient and help you figure out the best way to move forward. So briefly, some examples. So the first is activated charcoal and ice cream. So, you walk into an establishment, you see that they're adding activated charcoal to their ice cream. So first step is to identify the ingredient and its use. Get as much information about the charcoal being used, how much is being used, is it only going in ice cream, is it going in waffle cones? Getting as much information about that is the first thing you want to do. And then per our flow chart, the first question you have to ask is it being used as a color? Then I'm going to put this definition back up on the screen again. And point to the part that says the material must be used in a way that any color imparted is clearly unimportant insofar as the appearance, value, marketability, or consumer acceptability is concerned. So it's a color, right? If they're selling black ice cream, it's a color. Cool. So then you've identified its color. You're going to go look and you're going to search Title 21 of the CFR for the ingredient. In this case, if you go do that, you'll find there are 3 sections in Title 21 of the CFR that mention activated charcoal in food, but only as an indirect food additive. Your next step then would be, okay, well, to check the GRAS notice inventory. You won't find anything about activated charcoal there either. And finally, you could, reach out to the pre-market inbox. We would likely tell you that there is an SCOGS report on activated charcoal, but it only applies to uses as processing aids. It doesn't actually apply to a direct additive. So none of these uses are going to apply in our ice cream shop situation. And so it is an unapproved color additive. The food is adulterated. And that would be true regardless of if, there was a GRAS notice, anything like that, because again, it's being used as a color additive. There must be a color additive petition for it to be used that way. Oh, I got ahead of myself. This is just outlining the path I just told you, but look, the pre-market email is on here again. So in case you've missed it. And so again, the bottom line for this ice cream with charcoal in it is that the ingredient is being used as a color additive, but it doesn't have an applicable color additive regulation. Therefore, its use is unapproved and this food is considered adulterated. Another example is stevia leaves as a sweetener in baked goods. So the first thing you're going to ask, is it being a color additive? Let's say in this situation, it's not. It's being used as a sweetener. So no, not color additive. Then you go into CFR, you search 21 CFR. If you search 21 CFR for stevia, you're not going to find anything. However, if you go to the GRN inventory, you will find something. You'll find multiple notices for stevia glycosides. Each notice is specific for use. However, there are no notices for stevia leaves. All of the GRN, all the GRAS notices that the FDA has evaluated related to stevia are specifically for these highly purified stevia glycosides. So, if you were investigating this, you were trying to figure it out, and the ingredient you were looking at wasn't covered by those notices, one thing you could do is search those import alerts, and you would find alert 4502 that indicates that whole stevia is not an approved additive. The import alert says, with regard to use in conventional foods, stevia leaf or its crude extract is not an approved food additive and is not considered GRAS due to inadequate toxicological information. A warning letter has been sent to retailers around using these more crude extracts of stevia. So, the bottom line is if it's got stevia leaves or crude extracts, it's adulterated. And again, and this sort of highlights that this can be very nuanced. Then there's some complexity in here and figuring out some of these, especially some sort of any newer ingredient or controversial ingredients. There's really some nuance in pinning down what the regulatory status is. So always, when in doubt, please email us. Please email us. We are happy to answer your questions. And with that, my formal presentation is complete, and I will be happy to take as many questions as time allows.
All right, great presentation, lots of good information. I think we have a question. You got a lot, but I'm hoping that with the resources and information that you provided, you guys check those out. Alicia provided some information in chat where you can find, I have to scroll up so much, or you can go to the Southwest Breakout and look under resources and find the resources that she sent in the links But we will start with the very first question, and we'll try to get a couple of these in before break. Could an indirect food additive be considered nuts, example, peanuts, tree nuts, etc., if the facility processes product with those as well as other items?
I'm not positive, but my inclination is it would not be an indirect additive. It would be, I think there may be like cross-contamination regulations around our allergen regulations. But I don't believe that it would be an indirect additive, but I'm not positive.
Okay, our next question is, sorry if this has already been asked, but last year there was some discussion on CBD and is it not being grasped. Have there been any developments on this issue?
No, not that I can discuss in a 300-person Zoom meeting. If you have questions about CBD and you would like the official response, please email me pre-market inbox.
And that would probably go for our next question is along the same lines, is CBD, kratom, Delta 8, etc.
Yes.
Ingredients, yeah. Kava as well. So they've added kava.
Yeah, all of those things, if you're encountering them in the field, please do email us. I cannot promise how satisfying the response will be. I don't, as many of you know, some of those ingredients fall into a gray area currently, but still please email us. Please email us if you're encountering them and you're trying to figure out what to do.
And here's one that says, I know I am jumping ahead, but want to make sure you cover if we on the retail side should assess using a natural coloring like beet juice or squid ink as a color additive.
Yes. Natural, artificial, either way, if it's imparting color, it does need to be a color additive. So as the example I'd given with pink lemonade, if you use pink lemonade and they're using beet juice, even if it's fresh extracted beet juice, it's still being used as a color additive for that purpose. So it will need a color additive regulation.
And then we're going to do just one more. So is there a banned ingredient list, essentially generally recognized as unsafe list? Example, FD&C red number 2 was banned in 1976.
I don't know off the top of my head. I believe that the CFR I am pretty sure that the CFR contains a list of foods that have been deemed unsafe. I'm not positive, but an important caveat to that would be, as with a lot of these lists, it won't be comprehensive. So if it does exist, it's likely going to include things that may have had a safety status that were revoked, but it won't be like a comprehensive list of ingredients that aren't allowed. But I'm not 100% positive, so don't quote me on that.
All right, well, thanks again so much, Dr. Overby, for giving us an excellent presentation, awesome resources and links you gave, great flow chart, awesome. So I think now I'll turn it over to Justin for our next break.
All right, well, thanks again, Kwanzaa and Dr. Overby. So we will be taking a 10-minute break. We will be returning at the top of the hour.
Oh, Lord.
All right, well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your short little break there now. So now we're going to transition to our state report portion of the session, and this will be moderated by Alicia Johnson. She's also one of our retail food specialists. I'll pass it over to Alicia. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Justin. So last year, we did state reports where each program manager who wanted to participate gave a short presentation. And we realized that with the virtual settings that we have, with only 4 hours available, it's just not enough time to dig into how each state has been doing over the last year. So we asked state program managers, we got some feedback on what do you think we could do differently and still work within the confines of the virtual platform with our time constraints. And we got some really good creative ideas. And one of the ideas was, you know, some of these other online conferences, they are doing these reports, these posters that people can then look at, and then there's a chance for people to ask questions. And one of the comments that did come up in the evaluations is that it was great to hear from other state program managers, hear how people were doing, but that there wasn't the ability to have that Q&A and that interaction. So we decided to give it a go this year and do some virtual state report posters and then open up the floor for some Q&A. So if I could have the participating program managers who sent in our posters turn their cameras on, please. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them introduce themselves briefly, what their name, what jurisdiction they're from, and their title. And then once we do that, we're going to go ahead and utilize the chat. And those of you who have questions for these program managers on the wonderful things that they have been working on, I read through them and I was so incredibly impressed. And I have a slug of questions that I can ask all of them, but I'm sure that they would much rather hear from you guys. So if the program managers could flip on their cameras if possible. Travis, I see your comment in the chat, no biggie, we will work with that. And what we'll do is we'll give them a brief moment to introduce themselves, and then I will ask folks to start dropping questions in the chat. If we could start with Travis, just so that I don't miss you with your camera off, would you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us the jurisdiction you work with and your title, please?
Sure. My name is Travis Swan. I am the Director of Consumer Health Service at the Oklahoma State Department of Health. My area is we are a state that has a state rule, and we contract with two of our larger counties, Oklahoma City and Tulsa, to take care of our inspections related to that. So yeah, I've been in public health for 15 years and happy to participate today.
Great, thank you so much. Cherie.
Okay, there's the unmute button. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Cherie Woodis, bringing you greetings from the great state of Arkansas. Everybody loves and knows us. I am the Retail Food Program Section Chief for Arkansas, and Arkansas is unique, I guess, among many, in that our whole state is one complete jurisdiction.
All right, thank you so much. Let's move on to, is Mark on from Iowa?
Yeah, I am, thank you. I'm Mark Speltz. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Food and Consumer Safety Bureau at the Department of Inspections and Appeals for the state of Iowa. We do both manufactured food and retail food out of our shop. On the retail side, we directly regulate a little over half of the state. And then we also contract with some local health jurisdictions to do retail inspections as well.
All right, thank you so much. Do we have Joe or a delegate from Texas?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Joe Williams. I'm the manager of retail food safety operations at Department of State Health Services. So we're the central office under Consumer Protection Division, and then our field staff are actually under a different division, regional and local health operations. And Texas is a home rule state, and we have something in the neighborhood of 250 local jurisdictions of varying sizes in Texas that have that permit and inspect their own retail food establishments. And then we have approximately 12,000 retail food establishments in our direct inventory. And typically those tend to be out in more rural areas. So glad to be here.
Great, thank you so much for participating. And Troy from Colorado.
Thanks, Alicia. Yep, Troy Huffman with the State Health Department, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Excited to be able to be here and answer any questions, share information that we might have. Colorado Central Maine Health Department, we do contract with local public health agencies to then go ahead and conduct the inspections in Colorado, where our team acts as the standardization officers for the rest of those local public health agencies across the state. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm not seeing any questions yet in the chat, so I will go ahead and get us started. And my first question is actually going to be to Travis. So one of the things you noted on your staffing updates is that you worked on some salary adjustments to help acquire some applicants. How did you go about doing that? And did you compare to other states or other public health positions? And did this lead to increases for your current staff?
Sure, I can speak on that. We have multiple levels of our inspectors, because we deal with retail food and manufactured food. I failed to mention that earlier, but on our retail side, and I guess our manufactured side, but we have 3 different levels for our main inspectors, which we call public health specialists. At an entry level is a 1, a 2, and a 3. And so our more experienced inspectors, after they've gone through standardization, are the level 3s. We were looking at and our staff help identify these as well, because they let us know. But we were looking at that entry level positions, and we were comparing it to salaries across the agency. And we were having our entry level staff who come in with a bachelor's degree and 30 hours of science classes, coming on board in parts of the state at levels lower than some of our administrative staff that had no college degree requirement, or other areas that we thought it seemed a little low, and we were having trouble getting applicants for those positions. And so we looked at our budget and identified how many positions that the PHS 1s and 2s covered, and to see if we could afford making those adjustments. And we identified that we could make the adjustments. We figured out a line that was a little bit better for hopefully attracting and retaining staff, because not only were we not getting applicants, we were losing staff too at those entry levels. And so we wanted to find a way to try to keep people on to get to that level 3 kind of area. And so we were trying to identify lots of different ways to do that, but that was one way to try to make those adjustments to see if that worked. And I think so far it has. So we've been having more applicants and keeping people around, and I'm always going to be looking for ways to keep and retain staff. So but yeah, it was an interesting thing once we start looking at, and I mentioned that we identified that salary in one part of the state. While we were looking at that, we also identified that different parts of the state had different levels or different salary levels for those PHS 1 positions, because our state is split up into 10 districts, and so some of the districts weren't having great communications on kind of between each other, and so trying to make sure that we standardize that process and get the information to the right people to make sure we're hiring them on at the right rates, and hopefully attract and keep more staff.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. I know that attracting staff and retaining them is a challenge that folks are seeing across the country. So thanks for sharing your procedures there and what you guys found. Cherie, one of the things that I picked up on your poster is that you guys did your CSIP, or your Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan, and that it was eye-opening. Would you talk about the process and what you learned?
Well, in a nutshell, I learned a lot about my program and where we stood on things. And it's sort of like dissecting a program or a hunk of meat. You take off layers and you discover, because I took my time and did each and every element in detail. It was something that I hadn't personally done in the program since I've been in this position, and it was it gave us a strong, cold look at where we stood, and it removed the doubt or the concerns and the plausible deniability of what we were doing well and what we weren't doing well, because here it is on paper. But it gave us I took the optimistic approach as to, okay, here's where we stand and we can go from there. And so that's where we've been doing. And any progress upward is a great progress. So it at first it was a little daunting, because where you thought you might have been doing a little bit better or better than the actual reality, it brought about frank conversations, and what we thought might have been working in our program, we had to adjust because maybe it wasn't working as we needed it to be. So it was a resentful tool at first when I started tackling it, but after I got into it, and I'm grateful. And in fact, I pulled it out, several times throughout the year.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to tackle your self-assessment and then put together that comprehensive strategic improvement plan, I really strongly encourage you to do that. I think all the specialists on the line and several of the jurisdiction managers on the line would say the same thing. So Cherie, thank you so much for sharing that experience and taking the optimistic approach. I totally understand when you're looking at something, you're like, gosh, we aren't where we're supposed to be, that can be disheartening. But I really appreciate that you took that approach. How wonderful, and thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
All right. Mark, I want to tell you, I absolutely love the bee photo on your state report. That just made me smile. Oh my goodness, I love bees, and I just love the fact that it incorporated all of your staff. One of the questions I have for you, it looks like you have several special projects that you guys are trying to tackle. And I love it when jurisdictions are thinking innovatively and trying to figure out how to move things forward and really think about what makes our program work. And you indicated that you got a grant to look at complaint, outbreak, and inspection data. Would you talk a little bit more about that project, what your goals were, where you're at with it, and maybe what you've learned so far?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank Tao Schlichty, our RRT coordinator, that put together the bee picture. So she does that. She's very creative and can come up with those things. So very, very good that she was able to do that for us. Related to the project, so it really kind of started with where everybody sits, right? How can we utilize our resources better? We all have limited resources. no matter if we're well-funded or not, there's still a limitation. So we started looking at what factors could we be looking at to make sure that we are in the right place at the right time. So we have a lot of complaint data that we collect. We certainly have a lot of inspection data that we collect. So we wrote a grant to build a Power BI page that will take our complaint data and our inspection result data and then compare the two. So we're able to see, okay, for instance, we have a high-risk facility that has 0 complaints. What are their inspection results over time? We have a high-risk facility that has had multiple complaints in a period of time. What are their inspection results? So taking and looking at that and saying, okay, so do I go to this place today or do I go to that place today? We're hoping to be able to come up with maybe a better way to focus our resources. And not only to take a risk assessment, which we're all familiar with how to risk assess. We all have maybe some different ways that we do it, but it's what type of facility is it? What foods do they serve? What population do they serve? Maybe how big are they? Those types of things. Well, those are all very static things, right? I mean, so does that mean every facility that we put in the high risk category that meets those same criteria is equal? And I should go to that same facility at the same frequency? So our thought was, what other variables can we look at to help us prioritize? So instead of having a static risk level with a specified inspection frequency that we go to, that is, it's not arbitrary, but it's also very static. It doesn't really take into account all those factors. Can we bring in complaint and potentially outbreak data if we have enough of it to help us determine not where you're going to go in the next year, but where should I go this week? So that's the ultimate goal. So we're looking at it over a 3-year project. The first year of the project here is we're building that data analysis tool using Microsoft Power BI and all of our data. The second piece is going to be maybe next year we're looking at putting together, okay, what's the model? What's the model that we intend to use based on some of the data? So we'll do some data crunching. We're trying to figure that out, determine what the model is. And then maybe step 3 is implementation of a new risk-based inspection system that takes into account, yes, who they are, what they do, who they serve, but not only that, that takes into account inspection result, complaint results, outbreak information, and really gets us hopefully to inspect the facility that we need to at the time we need to, as opposed to on some kind of static frequency. So that's the big picture.
I love it. I'm all about data. So when people try and use data-driven decision making, I just find that super fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. That is super impressive that you guys are trying to tackle that. Our next question came in through the chat, and this one's for Troy in Colorado. Would you be able to expand on your special project of attempting to perform only announced inspections at the full service facilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And just quick follow up on that, Mark, that you had mentioned. I'm really intrigued with that project. The predictive analysis, it sounds like that direction that you're kind of leaning towards. Keep us informed. Really like to see what you guys end up with that. But yeah, I did see that message in the chat, or the question in the chat. What ended up happening is a couple of years ago, some counties in Colorado didn't have COVID at all, based off of the political views of some of their county commissioners, while other counties did have COVID. And initially we started looking at it that we were going to do announced inspections, or at least get out and maybe do a very, very high level, high risk inspection within facilities, because we did not want to go for a very, very long extended period of time in some of our higher risk type of establishments, more full service establishments. The idea was initially to look at it from an aspect that I wanted to make sure we could keep the retail food team, the inspectors within Colorado, safe. So we would do announced inspections, checking to make sure, one, in a lot of cases, are you open? Are you trying to operate? Two, just kind of trying to make sure that they've got the right people in there to be able to ask the right questions. when we go to conduct those inspections. And then the final component was, the question is, have you had any cases reported within your staff in the last, 4 to 5 days or within the last week? And if they did say, oh, you mentioned it, yeah, I did have to send somebody home because they had some symptoms or something like that, nothing confirmed. We had enough work to do, we'd go to the next place. We're like, okay, we'll worry about you maybe later on. It was incredibly well received. We decided to go ahead and continue with that model. We kind of backed away from it instead of all facilities, kind of more specific to our full service restaurants, our C-Marts, convenience stores. Announced inspections wouldn't really make much of a difference. But the idea too, with staffing concerns within facilities, where some places are such low staff, if they know that we're coming in there, maybe they can make sure to have arrangements that possibly another person might be on staff, so that when we do a good risk-based inspection, we have good questions that we need to ask. Somebody's going to be able to be there to answer those questions, go over that information with us. No scientific statistical analysis based on the results of what we're seeing, but the overall feel from the team is that we really are not seeing a significant difference in the outcome of the inspections, that we're seeing cold holding. We still have walk-ins that are out. We still have violations that we would expect that if they know when we're going to be showing up, that those wouldn't be items that are there. And then the other argument too is like, well, if they know they're going to be there, then they'll fix everything. Isn't that kind of the point? So if the manager really gets diligent and trains up their staff the week before we get there to handle food properly and when to wash their hands and when to use the gloves and make sure the equipment's all working again, didn't we just accomplish what we were trying to accomplish? And maybe it was just for that moment of time when we're doing the inspection. Maybe not. Maybe that might stick with some of their staff, and that we might see an increase in proper use of gloves and proper hand washing and overall food processes. So that's what we mean by that. We're kind of trying that out. We're doing that within our facilities. It's been very well received by our industry. And thank you for asking that question. I'm really glad I got to share that with everybody.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that, Troy. Our next question is for Joe in Texas. Denise asks, can Texas explain or share the updated compliance penalty matrix?
Sure. We have penalty levels that are based on severity and also that assign particular particular fees in a notice of violation after our enforcement process reaches that point. And so we have an updated matrix that we're using that's going to streamline the process that we use. And we're going to be doing fewer what we call informal conferences, assigning lower and then medium and then higher penalties to firms that receive a first, second, or third notice of violation. And it will be up to the operator to choose whether to accept the penalty or to go straight to our State Office of Administrative Hearings. Now, we do have a process that we go through to reach the point where we send a notice of violation to a firm. It's not something that the inspector does on site. That comes from central office, and it's after at least one warning letter has been sent to the firm, and we have multiple and repeat egregious deficiencies. Did that answer your question? And the penalty matrix is still a work in progress, and it's being looked at by everyone from our upper management to our program attorneys to make sure that it complies with statutes, regulations, and affords, due process to the firm.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And Denise, please weigh in. if that did not answer your question. Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing that.
Sure.
Another question that came to us as a direct message. Mark, would you talk about how you're exploring podcasts for industry and community relations and where this idea came from, whether you're looking at specific audiences or topics?
So it is something that actually our communication director a couple of years ago had brought up, and this was kind of pre-COVID when we all had a little more time. So we have explored it. We actually recorded kind of one session related to primarily, I think that one was related to farmers markets, and really just doing something that is maybe more getting the information out to the public that's a little more consumable. At least in a way that they want to see it or want to view it, as opposed to here's a document, here's a website, look, just really trying to get more information out there. So it isn't something that we've, done a bunch of these, and yes, there's a whole bunch of success, but it is something that we're looking at. And we've done some dabbling in it. It is something that our communication director is very, very good at. So it's really just a matter of finding the time and the topics. Another topic that has been brought up is, our consumable hemp regulation here in Iowa, which is, I think most states are getting some form of regulation related to consumable hemp anymore. But there's a lot of misinformation out there about what is legal and what isn't legal. So maybe bringing together a panel and doing a little podcast recording and making that available would be a better way to get that information out. Because what we're running into now is across the board is people want to learn in different ways. They want to consume information in different ways. And if we just keep giving it to them on a piece of paper, whether that piece of paper's got a picture on it or not, I don't know if that is still something that they're really consuming. So we're looking to do something a little more, something that reaches more people. So we'll, hopefully we'll do a few more of those in the next couple of years and see some additional success.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, communication is such a huge part of our job, right? And finding the effective ways of doing that's important. So that's a very interesting project. So another question that came to us from a direct message, and this is for Joe in Texas. What is the plan for reworking standardization? What were the biggest challenges with implementing the 2017 food code?
Sorry, that's a bit, I had to search for my, get myself off mute there. That's a big question. Let's start with the standardization. And so I know some of the people in Texas know Jason Guzman, who is our training officer. And Jason is out on FMLA right now. And if he weren't, I'd be punting this to him. COVID killed us. And so we're basically having to do a restart of our standardization program. And that's going to have to begin with our own staff being standardized themselves. We've lapsed at the state. We're also intending to revamp that program and concentrate on the idea that standardization is not training local inspectors. It is an assessment of competence. And there are other things that go along with standardization. And so Jason and Kendall Vela, who works with Jason, are reworking that program. And we hope that they will be standardized sometime in the next several months, and we can go ahead and start offering standardization again to our local partners sometime in late spring, summer of 2023. We wish we could do it sooner than that, but those are the realities of the situation. I've also talked to some local partners who were floating some ideas about some things that we might do to relieve the load from DSHS. We are a small program. We will continue those discussions in the upcoming months, and we'll see where it goes. And then what was the other question?
Let me double check here. So what were the biggest challenges with implementing that 2017 food code?
Actually, adopting by reference is pretty easy. It's a heck of a lot easier to adopt by reference than to copy and paste the food code into the Texas Administrative Code. There's been a lot of consternation due to the fact that we also adopted the 56-item checklist, and we are, at least in DSHS jurisdiction, we are no longer using a scored form. We decided if we're gonna do this, let's do it the way FDA does it. We're adopting their code, let's adopt their form as well. So the idea is that we look at the deficiencies, the penalties, the violations by severity and by risk, and we discussed, it was brought up to us fairly early on as we were discussing this, that our manufactured foods people have been doing that for years. They don't, there's no scored inspection under manufactured food or under milk. So that's been one of the big challenges. Jason and Kendall and Jaime Sepulveda, our compliance officer, did do a series of presentations, particularly to some Texas Environmental Health Association venues during the buildup and in the process of adopting the food code. And I think the great job that they did in those presentations did help alleviate some of the fears. And I hope that as folks use the food code more and more in Texas, it will become something that you can't pry from my cold fingers. It's just a great document, and we hope that people begin to see the value of the annexes as well.
All right, thank you for that. And yes, change is hard, but once you adjust and you get used to it, you see the value in it. So thanks for bringing that perspective.
And just in time for, I think, maybe a new one coming up, right?
Yes, a new one should be coming soon. So there was a question from Adam, whether or not people are using retired inspectors part-time to fill gaps in inspections. So is anybody doing that? I'll just toss that up to the cadre.
Arkansas has done that. And first of all, I want to say, Joe, you're not alone. We were in that same boat as regarding standardization and such. And Arkansas used retired individuals to help out, mainly in our plan reviews program, but also before the pandemic, we used a few retirees to come back and help us catch up when we had a lot of shortages or vacancies in some of our rural communities.
I'm making a note.
Thank you for sharing.
And
all right, any others
Texas,
that want to
Texas, the state does not use retired part-time inspectors, or at least we haven't to this point. I would not be surprised, however, if some of our local partners do.
Troy, Travis, Mark, do any of you guys use retired inspectors part-time to fill gaps?
I can speak for Oklahoma. At the moment, the state is not using any part-time. I think we did in the past. I mean, I've been in this position for about 3 years. I think in the past they had some techs that would help with, I think, some of our public bathing inspections, and that may have been part-time. And then I know at the local level, Prior to my time here at the state, I was at the Tulsa Health Department, kind of in the same boat. They use some seasonal staff for public bathing, kind of when the summers hit. So limited use, but nothing currently at the state.
Okay, thank you.
I guess in Iowa, it is something that we have thought about, but really we don't have any at this point, any retired inspectors that are helping fill gaps. We're doing pretty well, honestly, at filling gaps with permanent folks. So we've actually explored using some of retired inspectors that might come back and, help us do some things like Cherie had mentioned, maybe plan review or something more administrative. So those are options that we always explore when we have an opening or a gap, and we found some success in utilizing interns for those projects as well. So definitely something that we will keep in mind as we move forward, though.
Can I add that those retirees kept up their certifications as well. So they continued their educational requirements. So it wasn't as if we had to bring them up to speed. Now, most of them done it on a very limited basis. We had some limited extra help funding that would fund maybe 1,500 hours or something like that. It was more like akin to a seasonal position, as some of you all have said. So we wouldn't necessarily utilize them all year long, or past a certain amount of weeks. It was just enough to catch us up or to give us an opportunity to fill a vacancy and get that person firmly in place.
Thank you. Cherie, I think this question from Dawn might be best suited to you. For the retirees that you brought in for the temporary fills, what type of funding did you use to pay those folks?
It was from our general revenue, but it was an extra help budgetary line item that they had. And it probably was because we had a lot of vacancies, so we weren't paying salaries for a lot of our state positions. So until we filled those vacancies, we did have some funding that we could, but there again, it was only, for so many hours, which equated out to be about, 3 or 4 months or less than that even. But it did come in, it was very helpful. These were seasoned people who allowed our staff to therefore train the new hires and not have to worry about, does this person got it right and that sort of thing.
Thank you for that. Seeing no additional questions in the chat, I do want to throw one at Troy. One of the things that Colorado is doing are these monthly fireside chats. And I'm a big fan of them, I have to say. And I would love it if you could share, Troy, how you get topics for the calls, what triggered the development of the fireside chats, and whether or not they've helped with uniformity, training, and standardization.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alicia. I don't know exactly how it kind of originated. It was probably back from COVID again, that we just wanted to stay in touch with our local public health agencies, our regulatory community. And so we would on occasion have various webinars, our team kind of searching for, looking for projects. When we were in lockdown, would research topics on different things that we'd just kind of organically would have a webinar. We recorded them, and then we would post them on our Colorado Collaborative Retail Food site that we maintain. We do also have a general assistance line for inspectors, and that's where a lot of the ideas come from for the topics. These fireside chats, another title we came up with was an office hours, retail food, state retail food office hours, where local regulators could log in at a certain time be able to ask questions about the code. Stump the chump is another term that's been thrown out there too on different things. But what we would have is maybe 10 or 15 minutes on maybe using time as a control, or 10 or 15 minutes on date marking, or just different like aspects of the code, or HACCP questions and things like that. And members of the team would just take those topics and do maybe just 3 or 4 slides, cover that information, and then open it up for general questions afterwards. And we do it on a monthly basis now. Been very, very well received. Everybody really enjoys them. The team really enjoys them, gets the opportunity. Usually we have sometimes close to 100 inspectors log in to watch the fireside chat, the office hours, and then like I said, we post them on the website. So it almost kind of sounds similar to it when Mark was talking about his communication project, where we're focusing towards all of our local public health agencies and our regulatory side, maybe to help with that standardization piece. On that other side, again, I'm interested, Mark, to see how that plays out for you and how you can get that messaging out to the industry. But it sounds very similar in nature to that, that Mark's actually doing. So, but that's what we came up with. And it's been a lot of fun, and always open for suggestions on topics and stuff like that. So.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Troy. I really like that. And I think that COVID really did push us, right, to all think differently about how to stay in touch and how to continue, keeping our skills sharp and communicate with each other. I think that was a really huge challenge. So thanks for sharing that. In the last few moments that we have for this, I would really like to just get an idea of what you guys think your next year is going to be like. What is a big goal that you guys want to knock out for 2023? And since Troy is already up on my screen and that's the face I'm seeing, I'm going to start with you.
I'd like things to go back to normal. But define that for me, somebody. Joe, Mark, anybody else? I think this is the new normal. Kind of trying to stay ahead of things as far as where we're at, where we'd like to go. COVID just really kind of set our whole program back, and I think everybody would agree. I feel like we took, maybe 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards, that were kind of just a great opportunity for us to look ourselves in the mirror and do kind of a reboot on where we'd like to be and what we can do and move forward for not only our industry partners, but also our local public health agencies in Colorado.
All right, thanks for that. And I totally appreciate it. I am itching to get back to normal, but I don't know what the heck that is anymore. Okay, Joe, could you please tell me what you think the big goal would be for Texas in 2023?
We're going to do a self-assessment, and we want to get the standardization program ramped back up and back up and running. I'd like to say it would be nice if we could get 5 more people here at central office, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then we also, and it's actually been kind of housed with our program from the get-go, we've been dealing with a consumable hemp product program here, and I've spent more than a little of my time over the last 2 years dealing with consumable hemp product issues, and that's still going strong. And we have a legislative session beginning in January, as a matter of fact, and we're expecting a cottage foods bill and a hemp bill, and who knows what they'll throw at us regarding the fact that we adopted by reference the FDA food code. So we might get told to go back to square one. You never know. I better not say that too loud, right? So it's going to be an interesting next couple of years, I think. And I'm like Troy. I've given up on normal. There is no there is no normal here. It's just been a weird time, and on top of that, most of our central office personnel are working from home now. So we've gone through that transition as well.
Okay, well, you are going to have a busy 2023, and I will be pulling for you. And I wish you the best with your legislative session.
Thank you.
All right, Mark, what do you think would be your hope for Iowa in 2023?
So like Joe, we're completing a self-assessment this year that we expect to have done by the end of the year here, end of the calendar year. So if those of you got a chance to see Julie Kraling earlier in the session, she's my rock star on the retail program standards, and I'll be doing that self-assessment with some assistance from some other folks. So getting that done. We had our interesting legislative session this year. So we we got a cottage food law and we got a home food processing establishment law passed. So we actually just went live with licensing today for home food processing establishment. And we had to create an entire regulatory program from scratch because there's nothing like it in the around. So my big thing for that is to have the program that we have put together and the training that we've already done have a successful first year of implementation of home food processing establishment regulations and completing that self-assessment. And then all the other fun projects we want to keep going too. So definitely want to dig into some data with the Power BI. Other than that, stay afloat, I think is the main thing. And if you can swim, you might as well be swimming for something. So take a look at whatever else we can grab onto and find some way to be creative and some way to figure out what can we do better. I have a great team here in Iowa that is always pushing the envelope, no matter what it is. They're going to ask why or why not. I have no doubt that we'll identify something else that we'll want to do better in the coming weeks.
All right, well, thank you for that. And I wish you luck as well. And I love your slogan. If you're going to be swimming, you might as well be swimming for something. So that's excellent. Thank you. Cherie, what about Arkansas?
Okay, first of all, Arkansas is going to ask that Texas can keep its consumable products on your state line. Okay, we don't need any more. I want to see Arkansas finally get their risk factor study done. We're in the process of doing our first one, and we're excited about that. We also have been working diligently for years. We started and COVID hit, and we started again on getting a rapid response team together. We too were decimated by COVID with regards to our standardizing our field staff. So we're way behind. We're so behind, we're not even behind, we're just starting over. And so we hopefully will have a great portion of our field inspectors standardized. We only have one standardizing officer in the state, and he goes around and standardize some regional people who then standardize the local inspectors. And that process was going well until COVID, and then now it's been another challenge. So my hopes for Arkansas is that we can get over the COVID hump and the setbacks that are related to that and any other incoming pandemic, and then get our risk factor study, get a chance to utilize our Power BI, because we also had one and use one of our funding models, but grant fundings to get that. And we're excited about that new tool or resource, and hopefully start meeting some of these standards, do another self-assessment, and then have it verified. And then that way we can smile a little bit bigger.
I love it. And I love that you're trying to tackle a risk factor study. I love it. I love it. I wish you a lot of luck next year. And Travis, would you talk to us about Oklahoma in 2023?
Sure. I think the two things that I see kind of us tackling that will kind of eat up our time and effort. And I like the comments of trying to get back to normal. Normal has shifted so much that getting back to normal is I think we're finally to a point where it's starting to look like it used to. It's where people have time to actually take on a project and stuff. So we applied and received through that NEHA FDA retail grants. We applied for the 3-year, did our strategic improvement plan. Part of that is looking at over those 3 years doing that risk factor assessment. And so I think that we'll take up part of our time, looking at those at that data to try to identify an intervention strategy that might work, and then monitoring to see if it does. And then I think another thing that is specific to Oklahoma and truthfully specific to the state health department. We've had some new leadership and new legal teams, and we're having a lot of our processes looked at and modified and shifted around. So I think working through those processes to identify bottlenecks and issues with authority or enforcement capacities, or kind of just looking at all the processes around compliance and enforcement, or just inspection processes and what we're tracking and how we're tracking it, and databases, and some of ours are fairly dated. I'm sure other people that work in state government probably understand working with dated systems, but trying to look at all of it and try to make it more efficient. And you have a goal in mind that you want to shoot for, and there's going to be some growing pains to get there, but at the end of the day, you're hoping that goal is more efficient and better in the long run. So that's where I see probably, like I said, most of our time and effort spent over the next year or so. So we're happy to start working on it.
All right, sounds good. And I wish you luck as well. Thank you so much to the program managers who participated today and put together the wonderful posters. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at them, go to the Southwest main page and go to the bottom, and you will see icons, and you'll be able to see the wonderful work that all of these guys have been doing. So if we could go ahead and give them a big round of applause for participating with your little reactions there, and then I will turn it over to Justin to take us on home. Thank you. Justin, I think you're muted, hon.
You think I would have learned this by now. Let me start over. Thank you all for sticking around with us. And I want to extend a big thank you to the wonderful people who presented this afternoon. And for those that were the participants and listening in, which I hope that you found this breakout session to be very informative and gain some new understanding on some current trends in retail food safety. Will you all please take some time to provide some feedback? There's a survey on the bottom part of the Southwest Breakout page as well. So we would love to hear back from you all from what you thought of this session. Just wanted to also give a reminder that there is more to come. We have one more day of general session that will be tomorrow, the 21st. This will run from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. The final day for the seminar will be on September 22nd, and where we will be providing a risk factor study workshop, and that will run from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern as well. Just another shout out and a reminder to the festival funding model portal, which that will remain open until October 12th. We understand that resources continue to be a big problem for many of our regulatory partners. This funding can be used to provide some resources on helping you to conduct self-assessments, to help work on your comprehensive strategic improvement plan, that CSEP that you heard about earlier from some of our state program managers. This funding can be used to help facilitate training opportunities like those SABA workshops that we have coming up next year. And funding can be used for any special projects that you can think of that can help with your conformance of the retail program standards. With that note, please be sure to submit your form FDA 3958 to your retail food specialist so you can let them know or let us all know about the great work that you all have done with your program. Whether you receive funding or not, we love hearing from you all, and we will use this information to provide any achievements or milestone updates that we will publish online, and you'll receive recognition at our seminar, which I'm pleased to announce the follow-up from Kim's point is that those will return to in person next year. We couldn't be more excited about meeting with you all face to face again. So please, will you please stay tuned for the announcements of where those seminars will be taking place. I would like to close with this thought. We live in a global food system. So we have to realize that if there could be a foodborne outbreak in any part of the world, that means that it can happen in your part as well. So this is not just the job of one state, one county, one business entity, or one government body. This is a shared type of responsibility. Food safety, it really takes a collaborative effort and networking. So please work to continue on fostering those type of relationships and partnerships with your stakeholders and regulatory partners. Don't forget that we here at FDA are here as well, and we have your back. So please reach out to us for any assistance that you can think of. So on that, which on the behalf of FDA, I would like to extend a huge thank you all to all of our attendees and our speakers. So good evening and good night.